Here you are.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular City Commission meeting for Monday, February 1st, 2021. Would our Commissioner Torres lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sure. Please stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
With liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk call the roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England? Here. Vice Mayor Zamora?
Present.
Commissioner George?
Here.
Commissioner Romo?
Here.
And Commissioner Torres?
Here.
Okay, next item is approval of the minutes from our January 4th meeting. Any changes or corrections? If not, a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Minutes are approved. The next item, additions or deletions to the agenda?
None from me, Mayor.
Okay, so no deletions, no additions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
Madam Mayor, I have a question for that. Good evening. Item number 9, which is our strategic plan. I would like to see if the commission would like to move that to a special meeting or a workshop. Because it's item number 9 on the agenda, and we still have other items after that, I think that's probably a good hour and a half, 2-hour conversation potentially, because it is our strategic plan and it is very detrimental to our city, that I think that we should probably spend some time on it without feeling rushed as it gets later in the evening.
That is perfect. I was going to bring that up under changes to the order. I think it's perfect that we move maybe item 9 and 10 to the end of our meeting. What do you all think?
Sounds like a good idea to move it to the end.
Strategic plan and scheduling, so we move items 9 and 10 to the end of the meeting, or let's,
And then if we don't have time, we can just schedule.
right,
And then-
and we talked about rolling it to the next night, those items, so,
Which I think there might be a conflict with Commissioner Torres.
okay.
Yes, and I was going to
After
bring that up in my
Okay,
comments.
all right, well, let's see how far we can get tonight then. So we're going to move item 9 and 10 to the end of the meeting, right after staff comments. Anyone opposed to that? Mr. Taylor, do we need a motion on that, or can we do it by consensus?
By consensus.
Okay, so we'll move item 9 and 10 to after staff comments. Okay, so presentation.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I might also, just for the record, it's probably not important, but the way this agenda is numbered, we don't have a number 8 or a 9. It goes from 8 presentations to 10 public comments, so just so that there's no confusion in any of the recording or anything, it's pointed out for everyone's...
Commissioner George is speaking about the Roman numeral numbers.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's correct.
thank you.
I don't think it requires any action, I just
No.
wanted to make sure, for recording purposes, it was clear.
Okay. All right, so next is the presentations for a plaque for Ms. Smith.
Yes, I want to point out, I gave Jeanette Smith 3 more years. She's actually been on the committee for 24 years, not 27. I just want to introduce her. She's right behind me here, this lady here, and her daughter is right next to her. And the nice thing is that there's a sort of a bookends here. Jeanette is leaving us, and her daughter is the next item on the agenda to be a member. So I just wanted to introduce Jeanette to you and say 24 years is quite remarkable, because I remember in the old City Hall, the first meeting of that committee, and the members who were appointed in their names, like Captain Bob Beskin, who's now deceased, and then, of course, others who are moved away and not here anymore. But Jeanette has hung on. So we have a plaque, if the mayor would present it to her, please.
Smith, I am proud to present this to you and thank you for your service and to meet you. How wonderful, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a privilege being on the committee, and I hope my years on the committee I have helped contribute to the beauty of St. Augustine.
Absolutely, there's a lot that has been accomplished. Our Isle of Palms, and they were so decorated so nice this year, so good job.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, pleasure.
Admirable for putting in so many years of service as a volunteer for our city. I just want to echo that thank you that our mayor said. That's really amazing.
Okay, and then next, like the bookends, is consideration of Ms. Smith's replacement on CPAC, which is her daughter, Karen Candler. Ms. Candler, do you mind stepping up to the podium and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to be on CPAC?
Well, this is home to me. I was born in Jacksonville. My dad was born in Hastings. We kind of grew up in St. Augustine. My grandparents lived here. So although I have spent the last 30 years in Atlanta, I moved back here a year ago. My husband and I purchased a home at Surfcrest 20 years ago. And we love it here. We love St. Augustine, and this is where we want to spend the rest of our lives. Ooh. That sounded awful. And if I can do anything to help keep St. Augustine Beach sustainable, beautiful, and safe, I'd like to make a contribution, be a part of that.
Thank you, that's wonderful. Commissioners, anyone else like to comment or ask questions?
How did you learn of the opening?
It was mentioned to me at dinner one night. I have watched Jeanette serve on this committee for 20 years, and she's loved it. She has loved when they put in the palm trees and the different things that she has been a big part of. She took a lot of pride in that. So she truly made it look like a good thing to do.
Yeah. Well, you've got an amazing track record yourself. Looks like you've been involved in a lot of volunteering in prior communities.
I have.
So, we're lucky to have you here to fill those big shoes.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And you're the only applicant.
And I do not promise
So-
I will stay 24 years.
You're going to have to beat her record, actually. So,
Any further questions, comments? If not, I'll make a motion that we accept Karen Candler's application for CPEC and approve it.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none. Welcome to CPAC. And
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thanks.
In consideration of a conditional use permit at 105 3rd Street.
Oh, Mayor, I
got
think we have public comment.
Public comment? Oh, yeah, I always forget that one. All right, public comment. Would anyone in the room like to step forward? Public comment is 3 minutes. Comment on any agenda item is 2 minutes. We welcome your comments. Would anyone like to step up now for public general comment?
Hello,
Good evening, Mr. Reynolds.
Tom Reynolds. You know, you should have this clean, Margaret. This foggy doesn't do you justice, this foggy glass. Tom Reynolds, 50 Brigantine Court, St. Augustine Beach. Commissioners, I don't really want to hang around tonight. I hope you can get by without me. But I want to make sure, for example, the trees and the lights, you know, keep in mind if you're going to go with that theme next year, those trees need to be trimmed before. And then just like in front of Embassy Suites and then the pet shelter place, they had the tree and then they had the lights on the branches. It was breathtakingly beautiful. I'm not knocking our lights. First year, they did a great job getting them up and everything. But they could be a little bit more beautiful. Also, Commissioners, I hope tonight you'll send a letter to the county to get Pope Road fixed. I ask you, Commissioners, to take a look tomorrow at the county's agenda. Look at the last 4 or 5 items. They're giving money away. Okay? And it's terrible that we have this road, and I'll tell you, if you really want to see something, position yourself somewhere by the YMCA. Watch the bus come down, the Sunshine Bus. Watch the bus does not have enough room to stay on the road. Now, I really don't want to try to get DOT down here and all that. I just think if they got a letter, and you get Henry Dean to come out and look at it, I have a feeling they'll take action on it. Also, you know what? We really got to get those lighted crosswalk lights in. I know it's been all the wrong years. We got to get the TDC to pay for that. Those lights got to go in. I want to tell you something, Commissioners. I have 64,000 miles on a 2019. You can ask these cops. They see my car on the boulevard all the time. People wear dark clothes. They're not smart. And then the flags seem to have lost a little luster. If you just think about that. Also, Commissioners, on the swearing-in process, I hope you had a chance to take a look at that. You know, it really is a big deal. You know, you're an elected official like you and being sworn in, and it could be done a little bit more professional. And actually, and after the swearing in, I know with COVID, nobody wants to have a cup of coffee or a piece of pastry or anything, but, you know, it's such an accomplishment when you get elected, I think you should be treated better. And also, too, tomorrow, I will be down at the county. Highly recommend it. I'm pretty sure it's a done deal for Mr. Donald Samore to be on our TDC. I want to thank Commissioner Undine George for all the meetings that she went to on the TDC because, you know, it's right in the middle of her day, and I'm sure it's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I'll follow up on some of the things that you've mentioned.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else like to step forward and have general comments? Seeing none, no raised hands or anything, I'll close the general comments. Okay, starting into our public hearings, the conditional use permit for 105 3rd Street. Staff going to start this?
We're going to have commissioner comments.
Okay. All right, we'll start with commissioner comments. Commissioner Torres, any comments you'd like to make?
So, in fact, I do. I'd like to let the commission know that then between our meetings, I sent an email to the 5 county commissioners encouraging the county administration to consider a different approach of the reservation system for the COVID-19 vaccination. I do feel like our elderlies do not have the mental aptitude to get on some internet site or refresh it at certain times in order to get a shot. that is so badly needed. I try to explain this to my 90-year-old Korean War veteran father-in-law. It's a shame that this is the best we can do for our elderly, and I encourage the rest of the commission to do the same. I also attended a webinar from the Florida League of Cities, where the topics range from the 2021 legislative session, and those to be sales tax fairness, short-term rentals, discharge of surface waterways, and affordable housing annexation. The other thing that I'd like to bring to the commission's attention is, as Commissioner Ondine pointed out already, when we consider continuation meetings, I do wish that we at least first discuss it in our meeting here, and everyone look at their calendar before we can assume that we're available the very next day. As you know, that I manage a various amount of public or special districts, and those meetings are noticed several months ahead as well. So I like that consideration. Also, the last consideration that I'd like for the commission to consider is in regards to public safety. Recently, we had an incident where we had some kids that alleged that they could have been abducted by a woman and another person in the vehicle. I did have a conversation with law enforcement, the chief, Carswell, regarding our tag readers situation, and from that I learned that we have some throughout the county, but not in the city limits. And I think that if you would encourage, or if you would approve a consideration for the chief or his staff to come back in the next meeting or so with some considerations to have some sort of portable camera tag reader for us to consider, maybe if not for this year's budget, but definitely for next year, as I think that's a very important tool for them to have for when it regards to our public safety and the citizens that we represent. And that's all I have.
Thank you. The tag reader, and one of our items for workshops is going to be on the police department and their budget and take a look at it. So that may be an appropriate time for us to take a look at needs like the tag readers and the cameras, things like that. So we'll make sure we get that on the agenda when we talk about a workshop for the police department.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Anyone want to respond to anything else that Commissioner Torres has brought up to us?
Well, just briefly on the tag reader, I wanted to really, for our new chief's purposes, as I recall, when Hardwick was our chief, he had indicated that there was going to be in the near future an opportunity for us to acquire those tag readers through a bulk purchasing with the sheriff's office. So perhaps, follow up on that trail. It was not that long ago that he had said that. So in the event that there's something that's happening immediately or soon, maybe just look in on that so we can acquire it without having as much of an expenditure.
Yes, ma'am. I'll follow with him. I did speak with him this morning.
Great.
Without giving out the location of them, there are several on the island, just not within our city limits.
Yeah. Okay, great. And we have the interlocal, we can certainly utilize them, bring them in if we needed to.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that was my understanding. So I just wanted to, put that out there also for the commissioner's education on that issue. As to, historically, what we had done, Commissioner Torres, is we all agreed, prior to your being on, and now you're here, and so we need to have a new protocol, perhaps, I don't know, but we had all previously said we will reserve those Tuesdays. So it's probably just an oversight on all of our behalf that of your first meeting, that came up. And I imagine we'll have time to discuss that later on the agenda item for that.
Right, that it was kind of something we agreed upon, but then we will, before we actually flow over to the next night, we always check with
Understood.
each other's schedule.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Commissioner Rumwell.
Yep, thank you. Last week, I joined the VCB board meeting. It was a great meeting. It was interesting to see where St. Johns County kind of ended up. They were kind of the best of the worst. So the numbers were higher here than other parts of the state for revenue and for heads and beds. The room rates were higher, occupancy were higher as an average in St. Johns County, and also towards the latter half of last year, some businesses actually beat 2019 numbers. And so they were up year over year towards the latter half of the year. So that was a very interesting conversation and to kind of sit in on that presentation. So I look forward to the next meeting, and I enjoy being on the VCB liaison because learning a lot about local businesses and what maybe we can take in and help them, and if there's anything that we need to report back to them, I'm happy to do so.
Is it possible that they could break out for St. Augustine Beach what our occupancy rate is and our contribution?
I'll find that out.
Kind of, because I have a feeling we're pretty high up there for our population.
Right. From what I was told was that the Embassy Suite actually had a higher occupancy than the Casa Monica last year. So I don't know if it's because it's at the beach, there's space, there's people walking around, more opportunity, but that they were ahead of downtown. So I'll find out some numbers from them.
They won't do it. Is there any way we can do it maybe once a quarter?
I can address that.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, they will provide the information by zip code. And as you know, 32080 is much larger than our city. The issue is the intellectual property on those records. An individual hotel doesn't want to reveal their own personal, because of competitive reasons. So that's why they kind of lump them together. So we would not be able to, from prior data years anyway, we have not ever been able in the past to acquire just the city's revenue.
But would there be other hotels in the 32080 other than our city limits?
Yes.
Okay.
There are, as well as short-term vacation rentals and all that.
Okay.
I mean, I would speak for my own property, definitely never have I had as strong a November, December before, September even. So, it's an interesting trend that vacationers were kind of filling in at the end of the year what they had missed out in the spring.
And that's what they said. They said overall for the state of Florida that the vacation rental, short-term rentals outpaced hotels.
Right.
So there were more vacation rentals than hotel nights.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, every opportunity we get to say what we contribute to
I know.
bed tax is what we need to be doing because of the alternative and additional uses for bed tax now.
Right.
All right.
that's a good transition for Vice Mayor.
Right?
Vice Mayor.
I'll just, as far as addressing the same thing, we did ask, while I was on the BCB, can we break some of these numbers out? And especially, I think more specifically at the time was the short-term rental numbers we were trying to get for the beach. The VCB pays for that. I guess if we wanted to budget money, we could probably enlist the same firm or another firm to try to identify just within St. Augustine Beach what the occupancy numbers are, but I don't know that we'd want to go and
I do have a thought about that.
Yeah.
The application for maintaining your vacation rental license requires that you provide an annual summary of occupancy. So now that's, everybody submits. It's not like, I don't know that we have, Mr. Law, you can tell me the software that tracks that to crunch the data at all, or, it would probably be expensive to do that, but if anybody wanted to sit down and try to figure it out, I'm sure we could. So seeing the auditing that you have to provide as a short-term rental owner, every year you have to provide a summary of your occupancy.
Yes, ma'am, and honestly, I can't tell you why.
Right.
You've been interested in that.
Right, and gathering it,
I've spoken
yeah.
with the code enforcement officer of, and unless the commission needs that information, we have no way of putting it into a computer. Our
Right.
software will handle it. And it provides us no value. We have transient rental owners that haven't rented their house in years. They hold the license, and it counts towards the 100 cap. So it is my intention to do away with that requirement because it provides no useful feature.
Okay.
Well, I think we should always keep that in mind, because when we need a grant or when we need help from the commission, and there are certain items that we should have in our back pocket, what our contribution is.
And I think even if we just have, and it's much easier to get, a count of the unit numbers and the maximum occupancy allowed, the kind of the per capita, I think that speaks to the same argument, right? Because when you say, well, 500 of the units are within the boundary and there are only 700 on the island, for instance. And I think we can pull that data from what is published.
Okay, all right. Both of you gentlemen, if you need numbers or you want to follow up with staff, I'm sure staff can figure out a way, or maybe the boards can figure out a way to help us so that we've got that information.
And so, as was already mentioned, my application is in for the TDC appointment, and that is going to be on the county's agenda for tomorrow night, and then I'll get plugged into the TDC, and any information we can get to help our cause out here, we'll be pursuing that.
Anything else?
Nothing else.
All right. Commissioner Rumwell, anything else?
No, the only other thing is that the application for Mr. Tredick, I was in communication with him about trying to get some funding for the Ocean Walk project through the state of Florida. And the application, they did a great presentation. I think you were there as well, Mayor,
Yes.
at the county. And all paper, I got a message today from Tallahassee that all paperwork has been filed with the House and Senate. So the funding has been pushed into the House and Senate, and then we'll work the back channels as we can to try to get some funding for the Ocean Walk project.
Was there any other separate meetings with the legislature? No?
I just had a phone conversation with Representative Stevenson for about 45 minutes to advocate on Ocean Walk's behalf and for the city to get some funding.
Okay.
So that's
Great.
it, but everything has been submitted and they have it in hand. I know Mr. Tredick sent it in probably about 2 weeks ago, give or take, and then I got confirmation that everything is there, completed, and looks good. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, and we'll keep pushing Tallahassee to help us out on that project.
When would the next follow-up be on that item?
I'm not sure when they will reach out. They'll reach out directly to Mr. Tredick or not, but I'll be in contact with my folks in Tallahassee.
Okay.
And then kind of work some of the back channels as we're approaching session coming up here in March. And so once that comes up and gets going, then I'll be able to kind of follow it a little bit further, because it'll be tagged on to some bill, I'm certain.
Okay. All right.
So
Great.
I'll keep the commission in the loop, and Max and everybody.
All right. Commissioner George.
I'll save my comments for the agenda items. Thanks.
Okay, all right. The city manager, Max, and I had a meeting with the St. Johns County Assistant Administrator, Joy Andrews, on January 15th. And the purpose of that meeting was to talk to the county administrator's office of getting the old city hall, well, not the old city hall, but the movement of the old, the fire station to another area. And we kind of had to start all over again, explaining what our goal was, and we wanted to get it on their 5-year plan. And so there were 3 people, Joy Andrews, Tim Connor, and another gentleman by the name of Brad. But I could tell from that conversation, got to put a lot more pressure on them to get them to put movement of the fire station to another location. So Max and I will follow up on that. Every 2 to 3 weeks, I think we're going to need, and maybe follow up any opportunity to talk to Commissioner Dean on that item. We just have got to get it on the list, because that needs to be done by the time the Cultural Council lease is up, because there's no guarantee they're going to renew their lease on the old City Hall. So, Max, anything more on that conversation? And then following that conversation, we had another telephone call with Christina Parrish, who is the director of the Cultural Council. And right now, they have the lease on the old City Hall. Short term, she wants to do some cleanup and landscaping on the old City Hall, and maybe some other things to just clean up the property in general. Longer term, she's going to be looking at what can be done with the property. You know, we did pay for a building inspection. She's going to be looking at that, maybe updating that, seeing what grants that she can get. So she's very interested in the building to see what potential it has. And historical, she mentioned where in the past we could not get a historical preservation on it, we might be able to now. So that's one thing that she's looking into, and we will continue our discussions with Christina Parrish on to keep in touch with them. What do they plan to do with the building? What are their thoughts? That kind of thing. And so, Max, anything to add to that call? Okay, so that's all I have for this meeting.
Mayor, refresh our memory, when is that lease up?
It is up in 2026. So it is primed to get on 5-year plans. We're really going to have to push to get it on the county's agenda and keep up with the Cultural Council on this. 5 years can melt away very quickly. All right, my third attempt at the conditional use permit.
All right, this is a conditional use permit to build a single-family residence in the commercial sector. This property is west of the Kookaburras Restaurant. If you look on page 47, there's an illustration showing its relation to the boulevard and the surrounding properties. The Planning and Zoning Board recommended unanimously 6-0 that the proposed one-story structure be allowed to be built with the traditional standards we normally do as a medium density sector. Setbacks would be 10 feet, 25 front and rear, lot coverage maximum 35%, max ISR 50%. If you look through your paperwork, you will see references to variances because it was a two-prong approach. You were to disregard the variance as it was denied. And at this point, it would still be technically in an appeal process, the 30 days. So obviously the lawyer can advise, but I would advise not speaking about the variance, other than the fact that it was denied for lack of hardship.
Okay.
So any specific questions?
Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Law at this point?
Actually, I do have one. And this is residential to the west, correct? The lot to the west of the one in question is residential?
Yes, sir, right there. Here's a lot. That's proposed development. The lots to the west would be here. Right. So mostly, almost every time we do this, though, the question always comes up about the 15-foot buffer. Keep in mind that they are not afforded that level of protection if this property ever develops here. They are electing to build single-family residence in a commercial sector. So these people, if they come to pass, should not be punished. This is still a commercially zoned property.
So you're saying between the commercial use, if the next lot next to the commercial use, if it came to us for a conditional use permit, there would not be a requirement of a buffer?
Correct. So the intent of the buffer is to protect a residential sector from the commercial sector.
Right.
So we award the 15-foot buffer. Well, we're not doing a zoning change. This is simply allowing the construction of a single-family residence in the commercial sector. So as such, let's say down the road, this property is removed and we redevelop and we build a commercial development here, this resident would not be awarded the 15-foot buffer on this side.
Okay.
Were there any recommended conditions on the conditional use from planning and zoning?
Just a standard, we treat it as a medium density residential. Once again, lot coverage 35%, setbacks as per the single family table, and max ISR 50%. With that, keeping in mind they would be eligible for the permeable pavers, greater than 10%.
So the structure as designed in the application, does that meet the 35% standard?
Actually, ma'am, it's physically impossible to achieve 35% on a 50 by 93 lot with the current setbacks. The most you can hope to achieve is about 27.5%.
Okay, then,
So yes, it complies with 35%.
okay.
The setbacks take up too much of the yard, so it's physically impossible for me to get you there.
So you're saying it's impossible to violate the standard, or it's impossible to meet the standard?
It's impossible to get to the maximum lot coverage of
Right,
35%.
right. So-
The maximum you can hope to achieve with the 10-foot side and the 25 front and rear on a 50 by 93 lot is about 27 and some change percent.
Wouldn't that mean we're not there, it doesn't meet the standard?
No, ma'am, the 35% is the maximum.
Okay,
Yeah, they're well underneath 35% lot coverage.
okay.
And keep in mind, on page 50 of your book is a proposed elevation submitted by the applicant.
Right, but how does that kind of translate if it was designed to different setbacks?
You still physically can't get there, and if you want, I can spend about
Sure,
5
no.
minutes.
I was actually switching topics. I was, excuse me for my prior confusion about reversing the impervious
Yes,
surface
ma'am.
ratio in my head. I got it now, thank you. But as to the rendering and the design, how is it relevant to the application if it has setbacks that don't meet the code?
Yes, ma'am, as, I know where you're going with this, as the variance was rejected by the board,
Correct.
they have to redesign the house to a 10-foot side setback and 25 front and rear. Keep in mind, at this stage, the developers and the contractors aren't going to go into full engineering design on a building. And this meeting we have with planning and zoning was only 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So what we normally do is we approve the use of a single-family house or deny it, whatever the board sees fit, with the medium density setbacks and regulations. That's how we have been handling it. It's definitely up to the commission if they want to put any conditions on the conditional use permit. So if you want to say it's not to exceed 2 stories or 1 story, you would probably have that right, and that would have to, you'd have to confer with the attorney, but you would have that right. So this was an attempt at the beginning. It was obviously needs a little modification. They need to lose a foot on each side and a foot and a half on the front and rear.
So I guess my question derives from the fact that on some of these, maybe not particularly conditional use applications, but some of the, land use applications that come before us, it's always default language in our orders that the applicant is bound to all the documents, for instance, the rendering. So I'm wondering, is this creating a contradiction? And do we even require a rendering or elevation as a part of the application?
Honestly, until about a year ago, they weren't submitted in official
Okay.
capacity. This was done to help the commission. One of the
to
commissioners had
visualize.
mentioned to me, so we asked that the applicants provide 14 copies of the rendering, because by the time we're done distributing among 2 boards,
Okay. so
that's
that-
what it is.
So it doesn't create a contradiction?
No, ma'am, I don't think
Or
so.
binding anything?
I would believe that the conditional use permit will be written that somehow we grant the construction of a single-family residence in a commercial sector at lot blah, 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 with the parcel ID number. And if you see fit to put any conditions on you, they would be added in there. But as far as, I don't think we want to get into the design standard of the buildings. We're not there. As long as they conform with the code and the conditions that this commission sets forth, we can handle it on our end.
Okay.
The big thing are the setbacks, the ISR, and the lot coverage. As you recall, there was a confusion many years ago about a street side setback. By specifically clarifying this in the conditional use, it eliminates that.
Since Commissioner George mentioned setbacks, I've had a conversation with Mr. Law and our city manager over the fact that I thought we finally settled that the larger lots had setbacks of 25 and 10. But the smaller lots, 50 by under 100 feet, that their setbacks were 20 and 7.5. So I'm surprised that, so Mr. Law, have you had time to look into this a little further? And why are there the larger setbacks applied to this small lot?
If you recall, last year and the year before, I presented 2 independent times for these small platted lots to reduce the setbacks. Last year, it went to the commission, everybody was on board, it went to the planning and zoning board, it was recommended approval, in addition to reducing the rear setbacks citywide to 20 feet to allow us to move the buildings around. Well, with the reduction of the setbacks for the 50 by 93 platted lots, I recommend removing both overlay districts because they no longer serve a purpose. One of the overlay districts actually is worse for you if you elect to use it, so it has no value to my department. And we came back to the commission. The commission wanted to pull it because there were several members of the city that were upset with it, and then you had instructed it be pulled, and we moved forward with all the other code changes. And you had disclosed last year that you wanted to talk about it later. So if the city is prepared to move forward, because I did mention I've spent 2 independent times, and it takes months to present a case for here, not to mention all the people that tell me they love me when I do this. If you're ready to do this, we can roll it out and have it to you next month. If the big concern was building the 3-story residences with a 7.5-foot setback. That is a simple solution. You could limit that to 27 feet in height as we measure building height per the code. Well, that number is very important because that's what we use already in the mixed-use district for reduced setbacks. So that would show conformity with the other codes. We could have this to you next month if we do it, and like I said, I recommend you do it on 50 by 93 platted lots. If you want to let them do 3 stories, that's your call. If you want to regulate 27 feet, you could. I still have all the information from last year. I don't ever get rid of it. But like I said, the Planning and Zoning Board did recommend approval on the reduced setbacks.
I also thought it was kind of still in movement, Mayor. I didn't quite remember where we'd landed on it.
It was pulled and we moved the rest of the agenda forwards. Now keep in mind, so as you've heard me mention several times, this is commercial use. If we move over a couple lots, they're allowed to pay, I believe it's $400 for a overlay district, lots adopted prior to the adoption of the code or lots platted or something. So
Is that only to the east?
that's actually to the west. To the east is the beachside medium density overlay, which provides no intrinsic value to use. None. You actually have to pay money and you get worse. There's a little sentence in there that says if you comply with all sections of the code, you need not apply to the Planning and Zoning Board. So if we build over here, you submit a house to my department, zoning turns it down because you're in violation of the 10-foot side setbacks. But it's all right. You give me $410, I have to have the Planning and Zoning Board approve it because it's written right in the code. So that's another discord with the code, which is why I recommend if we go down this path and we reduce for 50 by 93 platted lots, we strike the overlays out. Keep in mind, we just had 4 overlays come through about 6 months ago, and that is north of Tides, south of the Marriott. And they had to be approved, and the Planning and Zoning Board asked why they're even seeing it if it has to be approved. That's the only mechanism to get them to reduce setbacks. So yes, I stand in complete support of reducing 50 by 93 setbacks.
Commissioners, I don't know if this is the time to dive into this, but all I can tell you is that I was quite surprised. I thought we had simplified everything, and so maybe we should direct our building department manager to dive into this. I'll meet with you and we'll start discussing simplifying this.
I can have it ready in 30 minutes, and I can have an ordinance by next month. It's already, from last year, it's still written.
Would you all be in favor of the building manager coming back to us on trying to simplify the setback issue?
Yeah, I think so, because I think we have a bunch of 50 or 50 by 93 foot lots left in the city, that I think long-term it's going to cause us more headaches to not look at something seriously than it would by...
I thought we'd already
Right.
reduced this.
Well, I remember, and I had a conversation with Mr. Law today, essentially, Mayor, exactly what you just said. And Commissioner Undine George, that's the same thing we had, was like, I thought we were there, but he reminded me, no, that we didn't. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, we got to get back to that point. So I didn't want to convolute this
Right.
application with that thought, but I'm glad you brought it up, because I told Mr. Law that I was going to bring it up, so.
Okay.
So the only thing I need from the commission is if you want to regulate 27-foot height or let it be 3 stories. And all it is a sub-note in the setback table.
I think maybe that level of detail we should probably leave, shouldn't we?
I'll prepare 2, and then you can pick A or B.
Yeah,
next
I know there were, you're right, there will be, you know, the issue was maintaining impervious, or pervious,
Irrelevant.
around the city. That was,
Right.
that were opposed to the modified setbacks, you know, the policy discussion behind it. And so that's why I'm just saying, you know, this isn't a noticed thing. I don't think we should be pulling the commissioners, you know what I mean, on those details. So
I'll do
that
both,
our
and
resistance
you guys
has
can
been-
just choose at the next
Yeah,
month.
that would,
But as far as the impervious, you're still bound to 35%, whether you go vertical, 1, 2, or 3 stories.
oh
it's
no,
still the
I
same.
mean collectively in the city, for sustainability purposes, for stormwater runoff and
Yes,
all of
ma'am.
those things. That
But
was,
we can talk about this next month. You'll have something on.
Okay, all right.
So back to the task at hand. Once again, this is a proposed 1-story building, single-family residence in a commercial sector. Just to remind everybody, this property would be eligible for the transient rental program as it's commercial with no cap.
Any further questions for Mr. Law? Then, the
Mr. Whitehouse is here.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Commissioners. For the record, James Whitehouse, St. John's Law Group, 104 Seagrove Main Street here in the city of St. Augustine Beach. I am here on behalf of the lot owner for this. Mr. Law did a great job of presenting this. Obviously, it's coming to you with a unanimous recommendation from your Planning and Zoning Board. We had some extensive discussion there about this issue. Glad you kind of brought up the variance issue. We're not going to talk about it tonight, but I mean, I think that will particularly help this applicant because he would like to build the 1-story, and I think you're going to hear from the neighbors in public comment because they came and spoke it, and I've spoken with them in between the meeting as well. So he'd really like to do that. Obviously, tonight we're just discussing whether or not residential is appropriate in this commercial zone, so appreciate if you could approve that for him with the unanimous recommendation and the staff recommendation. The only 2 things is one of the options is to have it run with the land, which when we're doing residential and commercial, we have it run with the land because if they sell the house, you don't want to have somebody else to have to come back and ask for it, number 1. And number 2 was, in the last few, if you'll recall, in these transitional areas, as Brian said, a lot of times we've said, you know, as long as you meet the city requirements for that medium density, you can move forward even if there's some changes, you know, to the structure itself, because we don't tie people, as Commissioner George pointed out, you know, to the elevations and things are submitted for your guys' guidance in the Planning and Zoning Board, not for technical detail as to how the thing will be. But in any case, appreciate your time. I can answer any questions and appreciate your support for approval. Thank you, ma'am.
Any questions from Mr. Whitehouse?
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this?
Mr. Whitehouse?
Oh, is he the only one?
The only one I have a card for, yes.
Okay, all right. Well, then, back to the task of making a decision on the request for the conditional use permit of a residence in a commercial district. Any further discussion on this? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll start out with some discussion on it. I mean, I know we've been trying to preserve commercial for commercial use as opposed to, you know, the quasi-residential use. But we do have an already existing viable business taking up 3 of the closely situated lots, and the property immediately to the west of this is residential. Although you really could develop the 2 vacant lots as another commercial use, I feel like for this particular situated lot, a single family, even for short-term rental purposes, if that's what ends up happening, really doesn't contradict some of those other policy concerns that have steered me away from approval of a residential on commercial lots in the past. So, but I think it's, kind of important to differentiate that. So those are my thoughts.
Mr. Law, do you know, does the commercial use own the other lots, the adjoining lots?
I can get that for you real fast.
I don't think they do.
And while he's finding that, I'll just take this moment to say I agree with what Commissioner George said, 100%, so just to save the time there.
Great.
Well, and I do recall our vision plan from 2006 also recommended that on the west side, that we reduce that total amount of commercial. We didn't need as much expanding westward. Keep the commercial along the boulevard, but didn't have to go that as far westward, and we never did make that zoning change.
Well, I agree with Madam Mayor and Commissioner George and Vice Mayor Samora that, in my perspective, the direct frontage of the boulevard should remain business commercial. And whether it becomes upstairs maybe a short term and then downstairs business, but I like having the commercial stay on the boulevard. And as we go back, we really need a transition for the single family homes that now are coming more easterly. And so I don't think the people next door to this lot would want a 7-Eleven or something commercial that could potentially go there. They probably may not like short-term rental, but that's better than the alternative. So I completely support this conditional use permit.
And I guess I'll provide my comments while Brian's still working. I do support the commercial, the intent of having a residential home in this particular lot. What I am opposed is the system of how we go about to get to that end. And what I mean by that is this is a commercial zone property. Therefore, if I build a house in that property, I do not have to go through the permit requirement for the city to obtain a transient rental. And I can go quickly and it become a VRBO. The home, while that is advantageous to the homeowner that bought the property in November 2020, knowing that this is a commercial zone, I support the residential part of it because it makes sense as to where it's located. But I would encourage it, why not turn it to a residential zone and have them build a house? And then instead of circumventing the system when it comes to getting the permit to have a transient rental property, let him apply like everyone else.
Commissioner, can you kind of clarify that a little bit? So are you saying, okay, because the property is zoned commercial, so therefore if a single family is built here, they may VRBO the property without further limitation on those 100 permits because those 100 permits are only with
My
our community
understanding, they have
density.
to build a certain code to make that, like the fire system into the building and some other stuff. But yes, that's my understanding.
So are you saying that you think that they should be restricted to the 100 licenses?
Yes.
Okay, so
They should be in the group of those that are waiting. Just like I hear it all the time, we have a ton of residents that wish that their property was considered to be transient rental and can't. We have 100 people that are on this privileged list.
Right.
With no way of getting new people into that list.
Right.
And this is a way to circumvent it.
And as we heard earlier, a lot of those holders of those licenses are just sitting on them and not utilizing them.
That's correct. We've heard that too. Which the argument when it comes to earning additional income for the city is irrelevant if they're not renting it.
Right, but the property owner is not obligated to seek change of zoning. There could be a lot of reasons why they would want to preserve that zoning for future uses. We don't have any way
But the
of,
intent, to all the respect, the intent to purchase this property
Yes.
was for this very same reason.
Correct.
There's none other. Not
Correct.
to put a 7-Eleven, not to put anything else other than a house.
right, because that is currently allowed, provided they satisfy the
So
conditional
it's
use
it's
process.
allowed with permission from this commission.
Well, I think what you're articulating is fairly consistent with the policy preferences voiced by this commission on prior applications, which is that we want to generally preserve the commercial so that we can have or realize the vision plan of having a vibrant commercial boulevard.
Yes, it was decided here, this commission, in December 2019, whenever there was the same situation came to the table and, or to
Right.
the discussion, where the commission then decided to support the master plan and keep everything commercial.
Right. Yeah.
One of the reasons that in these commercial lots, we don't want to get into a situation of changing by lot the commercial zoning. The recommendation of the vision plan was to reduce the depth of the commercial zoning on the west side. We never did that, and we probably won't. But to change the zoning designation lot by lot would maybe end up in some spot zoning, and we would rather keep it, I believe, the commercial zoning, unless we're going to do something more broad, rather than change zoning lot by lot, because you could end up with unintended consequences of spot zoning as they come before us for the change. So that, and Mr. Law, could you kind of add to that?
I would like to, first to go back, the single-family residences used as transient rentals in the commercial sector still apply for licenses. They're still contributing to the
Yes.
transient rental
But
fund.
not to the 100 permits.
Actually, sir, the 100 applies to only medium density.
So this would not be applicable to that.
No, but it's issued a BTR, and the same transient rental inspections and fees are paid for commercial.
Right.
It just unfortunately doesn't have a cap on it. But yes, in the commercial sector, you can continue to do transient rentals. There is no limit, but you're still obligated to perform in. My
I
department's still
understand that,
obligated.
but they don't have to wait for the permit.
No, they have to wait for the CO, schedule another inspection, and
That's a
apply
given.
for BTR through Ms. Beverly's staff.
Yeah, that's easy.
There is no difference in, as far as fire goes. There has been great debate at Tallahassee regarding fire for single-family residences at a transient rental. As far as I'm aware, the Florida Building Commission has not shown any interest in changing it because it's impossible to enforce from a building commission standpoint. Now, as far as spot zoning, in this case, could you potentially rezone? You could, but only because it sits here. If, let's say, this lot was in question,
Right.
now you couldn't do it because you'd be
Right.
having a break in the zoning district.
Spot zoning.
And as far as condensing the 300 feet from the center line of the boulevard west, that could become a very big problem, only because now these people that have enjoyed the benefits of the commercial sector, which we just discussed, you're now telling them medium density. So now you just took away a livelihood, right or wrong, irrelevant to me, it's policy. That would most likely result in legal action.
Yeah, back
Yes, the city.
zoning is difficult. I've been through some back zoning arguments and fights. It can be done, but it is dangerous.
I would believe if the city ever decided to go down that path, and that's their decision to make with the city attorney, that you would have to release the controls of the transient rentals. So the city's not responsible for taking away somebody's business, right or wrong. And that may get done for you.
Right.
You know, there's another movement at Tallahassee. I believe everybody convenes in March to discuss it. But it will happen. You can't stop it. It may not be this year, it may not be next year. But the government will release the ability of home rule. It'll happen. At that point, that's a great time to look at taking away the zoning and collapsing it 2 lots, which would be approximately 100 feet. Keep in mind, east of the boulevard, your commercial sector is 150 feet, west is 300 feet from the center. In this case, they're proposing something we do all the time. It's up to the commission, as always, on an individual case-by-case basis to warrant what's in the best interest of the city. Keep in mind,
Torres, have we addressed some of your comments or questions, concerns?
Yes, you have.
Okay.
I just think that we tend to, in previous meetings that I've observed, I mean, we have a parking problem in this city, and it tends to lean to things such as this whenever we don't, we break and grant things out of the intended purpose of the property. But, yeah, you have addressed everything. I respectfully disagree with it all. That's all.
So you would disagree with allowing the conditional use permit?
I would definitely would agree that the gentleman that bought this property should have a house here, and it should be zoned residential. I think that's the lot where it is at the very end of the 300 feet of the zone that is classified for commercial use. I wouldn't have a problem with supporting. I understand there may be some great deals to go through to get that change, but keep in mind, whatever we do here now, we're going to be experiencing in a few months when it comes back to the property from E and F Street. We're going to hear the same discussions again.
Well, again, this is a single lot as opposed to a cluster.
Yes.
And it's not a single lot that breaks up a cluster. Okay, so for me, those are very important differentiating characteristics.
Well, yes.
But I hear what you're saying, and, yeah, I do.
now, Madam Mayor, you asked me about ownership of the properties?
Yes.
Okay. The one that's selected is owned by Brad Behan. I'm not sure I pronounced his last name, so I don't know if you can read that. The property to the east of that is owned by Stephanie Knoll. That's owned by a corporation, most likely has something to do with...
Okay, so both lots are individually owned and not owned by the commercial lot owner?
Yes, ma'am, there's no one conglomerate that owns it all for development.
Okay, so there's, yeah, they're already broken up by...
Yes, ma'am, and keep in mind to the south, that's not a very good, too much light. That's a residence, that is the squatter, we call it the squatter's house, that is now being retrofitted with engineers to bring it back into compliance. So it is in a residential sector, the alley is vacated. It was really up to the commission to decide what they want to allow.
And if I may just take a few more minutes, I did do a little further homework on this. I did request from Brian Law's office to see a sample copy of the letter that went out to the 300-foot radius residents that live within this property, and if I found it to be suiting for the notice, and also did further ask if there was any opposed from any of the residents that provided any sort of opposing feedback. He indicated, or his department indicated, there was not. That is reassuring for pursuing this. So that does, I find some comfort in that. The other matter is that I don't understand is the request to carry this conditional use to be transferred in the event that this property is sold. Again, it just looks like it's more advantageous in circumventing, rather than if he's going to sell the property, he or she should come back through the process of the new owner and go through this. I don't understand, unless that's practice that you guys are okay with. I'd like to get that explained a little further as to why the transfer request.
If I may, Madam Mayor?
Yes, yes.
As common practice is, it does transfer with the land, because once we build a house on there, but I believe your question may be more suited towards before they apply for the building permit over here, they now get clearance to build let's just call it a transient rental, whether it is or not is none of our concern for what we're doing here. Is the property more valuable with the ability to build a single-family residence in the commercial sector? I believe that's where you're going.
Yes.
I believe several months ago we debated this at the commission, and I believe Mr. Samora brought up a point about it, and at that point it was decided that we not intervene And that because we just had it happen about a year ago. It was a property that was originally denied for conditional use. It came back prior to the 6-month window, given the fact that the properties were all split up. Well, we didn't know at the time, but a couple weeks later, we saw a for sale, we saw something, and then we looked and the property was sold, and to this day, there still hasn't been a permit. But a couple months ago, you did approve a conditional use because the 1-year moratorium ended with a different owner, and I believe Mr. Whitehouse was was representing the applicant. So that is something we have talked about. No final answer was ever given by the commission, whether or not you want to only issue the conditional use up to the point when the building permit's applied for. At that point, it's a legal submittal under state law, and you'd be hard-pressed to go backwards. Once the building's built, I do not think making the next owner come in and apply for a conditional use permit is prevalent. I think that's a waste of government time. And for what you've already issued it, so it stays with the land. But the question is, what do you do until the building permit's applied for? In this case, when I say building permit, that also applies to a zoning clearance sheet. That's the first step. So that's up to the commission to decide if they want to set a policy on this. It is something I brought up before.
I think Commissioner Torres was asking why the permanent improvement, the building, the residential building runs with the land rather than every time there's a change of ownership, they've got to come back and renew the conditional use permit for a residence. And it's more of a...
I understand now.
Okay, you understand that, okay.
Yeah, it'll always run with the land. Anytime there's a property improvement, the land development code supports that.
Understand.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
As to the other, I mean, I don't see how it would make any difference if the property is, so who it is that owns it when the structure is built, unless we were conditioning an approval based upon an elevation, in which case then we would want to make sure it's that elevation regardless of who builds it.
Right, and that's partially problematic because they don't know what the conditions of the conditional use are going to be until game day.
Right. And
So
they want
it
to
would be
invest
almost
all that
impossible.
money in
Yes, ma'am.
Engineering and architects. and-
Yes, ma'am. So what was decided last time was we don't intervene because we're approving a single-family residence to be built on a commercial sector. That's all we're doing. Whether they use it for transient rental, whether they change names, whether they paint it blue, pink, yellow,
Right.
whether they build 1, 2, or 3, if you want a specific condition, now is the time. If you want to limit the vertical height of the building, now is the time to do it, because if it's missed in this window,
Right.
that's it. Now keep in mind, this has a 1-year shelf life. If you decide to approve this, it has to be, we consider a legal permit submittal as the beginning of the process. That
That was
defines...
going to be my question, is if we approve the conditional use permit, how long do they have to seek a permit and start building?
And just to enlighten the commission a little bit how this process works, the first thing we do is we apply for a clearance sheet. Since I've been here, I've created basically a one-stop shop and drop to simplify operations. You apply with the building permit / clearance sheet application with 2 copies of a site plan that shows the development. Most people will submit the house plans with it. Once that permit hits our door, if it's a legal submittal, not that it complies with code, if it's a legal and complete submittal and all appropriate fees are paid to the city, that is the day it begins. At that point, they have 180 days between rejections and so on. If it exceeds 180 days, the permit application is considered abandoned. So let's say we issue a building permit, we get through zoning, everything complies. I issue the building permit, they pay the plan review fees up front, they never pick up the permit for 180 days. Abandoned. It's gone. It resets the counter. At that point, the building, let's say they picked it up, the building permit application, everything was good, we were building the house, and they just stopped. COVID happened. Construction stopped all over the city, we saw it. We extended permits, and that's my priority. Florida Building Code allows 180 days between approved inspections. So as long as that's happening, the permit is in good standings. But the key is to have the application and all fees paid in complete submittal within 1 year. And that's the rule, and that's why you saw the reissuance of a conditional use permit. There was debate whether or not the building official should have power to extend that. And I strongly oppose that because it took 5 people to approve it. One person should not be given that power, whether it be me or somebody else down the road.
Any further discussion on this? And I know we are taking a little extra time, but I think that it helps our new commissioner just some of the background and everything, so we'll be doing this a little bit.
It's been good discussion, too.
Yeah, and I understand where Commissioner Torres is coming from. I think I would have a different opinion if it was a residential trying to zone to a commercial to achieve the short-term rental. But because it's already in a commercial, I think I feel better about that.
I would, if I may?
Yes.
I would believe the commission should never worry about seeing a residential zone to commercial again, as your comprehensive plan strictly prohibits a commercial intrusion into a residential sector.
Say that again? The
The
plan?
comprehensive plan strictly prohibits a commercial intrusion into a residential sector.
Oh.
Your new
okay, so you're
comprehensive
saying
plan?
If there was a zoning change application, it is contradicted by the plan?
My department would recommend denial based on a comprehensive plan. They would come to
Gotcha.
the board, and then this commission would decide what to do.
And I feel better about that situation. I think keeping it commercial, though we may not want a bunch of short-term rentals, they're also paying the higher tax. It can't be homesteaded, and so the revenue that's coming into the city is higher than just residential that could be homesteaded. And I think it's that transition that makes me feel better about it. But I appreciate Mr. Torres's thought process of saying, hey, there's 100 licenses, I can now buy a commercial piece of property and zone it. But again, it's off the boulevard, it's closer to residential, that I feel that in certain situations it's acceptable, and this is one of them.
Okay,
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve with the height restriction. Did we want to address that? I mean, was that your recommendation,
May I?
Mr. Law?
May I address this?
Was that?
My recommendation, if you're approving this based on the fact that it's a one-story,
Right.
that it be put into the conditional use permit, and maybe the attorney could weigh in to make sure that's appropriate.
It's appropriate if you want to do it. It wasn't recommended by planning and zoning, but it'd be appropriate.
This is this is what was presented to you in the packets by the applicant. If you choose not to put that in there, then they'll be limited to the building height in Chapter 6.
Was the application it was for a single story?
Right, and keep in mind, you brought up a very good point that the application was based on a variance that did not come to pass. So it's definitely up to the commission what you want to approve.
Well, before I make a motion, can we get some, my recollection is that the structure to the west is,
One story.
is a single story? Or is it a second story in the back? You can find that out for us, Mr. Law. That'd be up to the mayor to,
have we opened this up for public comment
Probably
yet?
not.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
Yes, we only had one speaker card, but
All right. Okay, we'll let the building director, thank you, but opportunity to speak is passed.
If the presenters want to rebut something, I think you ought to let them
Okay,
speak. So
okay, all right.
if you're contemplating something different than was the original recommendation and they didn't have any notice, that might be a possibility.
Oh, so you're saying the recommendation didn't have...
The recommendation that
Structure limit.
didn't have a height limit on it.
I see, okay.
So if you're going to contemplate adding the height restriction, please let them make their argument on the other side against it, because they didn't know to argue against it before you started talking about it.
I remember, that was I remember I kept seeing in here, single story, and then the elevation and all of that. The argument about it being transitional certainly has to do with it being, the massing and all of that being situated in also transitionally appropriate way. But I'm curious about my colleagues' thoughts on this issue. I could argue it either way, so I'm trying to figure it out for myself as well. Does anyone else have a thought?
I'm comfortable with the planning and zoning recommendation, and
I am too. We haven't entered into height restrictions or, in the past on these conditional use permits, so without further discussion, I'm not sure I want to do it on just this one. Anybody else? So do you want to restate your motion?
Yeah, I meant to bring this up for discussion prior to saying I'll make a motion, and as soon as I said that, I realized I'd forgotten, so it came up as a question. I would like to know what is next door, though, before I restate the motion.
To the west? Mm-hmm. It appears, is your house blue?
That's to the north,
I got a 50-50 shot here.
northwest.
Right.
The lot is south, yeah.
Yeah, it is a two-story. Okay. Yeah, you had it a second ago. It's a two-story, yeah. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use application CU 2021-01.
I'll second. With the, incorporating the motion that was approved by the planning and zoning, that it runs with the land.
So amended.
Let's roll call vote, please.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Rumwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Torres,
No.
Commissioner England,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Samore,
Yes.
and Commissioner George.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Oh, now that that's done, just to clarify for me and my staff,
Yes,
there's no height restrictions other than the city's ordinance.
correct.
Okay.
And you have little homework for next month, which appears to already be done
Oh, yeah, it's done from last year. I got it.
on those ordinances. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Law, ordinance 20-15.
Yes, ma'am. Ordinance 20-15, this is the final reading. There's been no changes since last month.
There is one thing on 20-15, on page 12 and 13. I think your table is missing the mixed use. On the beginning, you added the mixed use district to the first table on page 1 and 2, but I don't see it on page 12 and 13. So,
We can definitely put it in there if you'd like, but keep in mind, mixed-use districts are the commercial zone districts. We defined that about a half a year ago.
okay,
Mixed-use districts will be all commercial zone from basically Pope Road, I believe, to the F Street, north side of F Street, maybe.
okay, so, all right, so help me. Why was on the table on page 1 in your memo, you added mixed-use district to that table, but on page 12 and 13, you didn't?
Yeah, we can put it in there.
Okay.
We can just amend the ordinance, and I'll just add
Okay.
a row and add it in there.
Okay, all right.
Mhm.
Any questions for Mr. Law on this?
Thank you, Mayor.
Any public comment?
I have none.
All right, well then I will make a motion to, we need to read the ordinance 2015 preamble.
All right, ordinance 2015, an ordinance of the City of St. Augustine Beach, Florida, making findings of fact, amending the city's land development regulations, sections 607.10, 601.02, 607.07, 11.03.02, 11.03.04, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict, providing for codification, and providing an immediate effective date.
Any further discussion? Being none, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 20-15. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, ordinance 2015 is approved. We have a consent item, budget resolution 21-01. Any discussion?
I have a question. for
Okay.
staff. Patty, does is this software, would it be used by the police department, or would it just be the other city?
No, it is for all city employees, and so it will interface directly with our current finance software.
And do you think this is a critical need?
I think it's an important step to having everything more automated. Do I think it's critical? No. But I do think it's an important step, and we have had requests in the past from Commission to automate the time and have a better timekeeping tracking mechanism versus, a handwritten or Excel spreadsheet to track our time.
Right, so this would help, I know that sometimes there had been some issues, like if somebody was called in sick on the day of payroll and all that, so it'll fix that issue.
It will. So it will allow, while we cannot mandate it, it will be an app that all employees will be able to have on their phone, or they can use it at home on their computers. So if someone were to feel ill that day and, they've called in, they can actually go in and amend their timesheet from the software, utilizing either method. And then it funnels to the supervisors directly where they can approve it. So if, for instance, Mr. Tredick was away at a seminar when COVID lifts, he could go online and approve his payroll for his whole entire staff.
Okay. And will it improve efficiency then for staff?
It will. Everything will be approved. It will just be a simple import function, and it will allow me to pull it into the payroll software and write the checks. It also automates for the employees the ability to schedule time off, submit requests, check their time that they have available for sick, vacation, comp time, all of those things. We can also funnel out to them any resolutions that we may do for our personnel manual. The personnel manual can be housed on the HR software. And then, as we'll see later this evening, Beverly will present some adjustments and amendments to our personnel manual, and those can be sent out to the employees as well, where they can have, access to them readily.
What type of competition shopping was done to cost compare? 'Cause I know there's some free apps out there, but, I know they charge as you get a larger and larger institution, so.
They are, unfortunately, they do not funnel into our software. So it would be just summarizing, and then I would have to turn around and put it right back into our software, which is basically what we're doing now, either utilizing handwritten sheets or Excel spreadsheets. So the goal was to automate the task and be able to hit an import function and then just simply put the check stubs in and print them. I believe that there is a part of it that will also allow us to have copies maintained in the system. So for many of our employees, they are direct deposit, and rather than printing out stubs every week, they will be available online for them, as well as their W-2s. They will be able to make changes to their W-4s. Has a lot of flexibility in it, and for the biggest part of it is it interfaces with our current financial software.
Is this the most affordable package that works with our software?
It is.
And does what we need?
Yes, and then there would be an annual fee, as we have now for all of our other modules that we use.
Right.
I believe it's around $3,000 in total that would be distributed amongst all of the departments based upon the number of employees they have in each department.
Yeah, this says 3,900 in the memo.
Yeah.
Okay, I just, 19,000 is, could be somebody's part-time salary to do the data entry, but over, then going forward each year, so I just want to make sure there had been some real rigorous cost comparison
And again, we can maintain where we're at now. It just becomes a function of someone physically being here to actually put everything together. As we saw in the pandemic, trying to, make sure that we all came to the office, no one was sick, and approvals and such, it does facilitate a little bit more easily.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that the efficiency issue is important if it's going to address some of those issues we've had in the past and
Yes.
update our old systems.
Kind of bring us into the new world. We will also be able to run reports, which is, very important for us. We do track other sides for our billing to St. Johns County, for instance, for beach patrol. And this will allow us the flexibility of a code, so when we need to know how much we're billing back for beach patrol, we can simply run a report versus maintaining spreadsheets on a monthly basis and then summarizing them and printing an invoice.
So will the PD's system work with this one?
They do not have an actual system. They use the same Excel spreadsheets right now that we do for payroll.
I'm sorry, I thought my first question, when I said, will the PD use it, I thought you said no.
No, all departments will use it, yes.
Oh, they will use it?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay, awesome.
Yes, so
Okay.
it will break it down into the different categories. We'll be able to run more detailed reports, as I said, rather than tracking them manually. It does take a little bit more time off of our hands as well.
Oh, yeah, no, of course, got to be a lot of man-hours saved. Okay. All right, thank you. Those are all my questions.
This module, I know we have a current vendor that we're using for most, if not all of our, and we're trying to expand the modules on the current vendor.
Correct.
Is this module part of that current vendor?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's all
All
under
right.
the Edmunds GovTech MCSJ program that we use for our finances.
Okay. So that's good. That way there's more interface and more maintenance and upkeep on a unified basis.
Correct.
Okay. And the police department, is there manual entry by the employees or by somebody else has to get it in there?
So each employee will have the availability to do their timesheets on either the app or their computer. I believe they're all doing their individual timesheets at this time. And then they print them out. They have to go through the chain of command for manual signatures, and then they come over to me for data entry and approval as far as their time off requests and such. Though all of those steps will be kind of streamlined, so once I get it, it's already approved. The system will make sure that if someone submitted a vacation request, that there is vacation time available for that person. The supervisor will approve it, and then it will just interface into our system where we can print the checks.
Okay. And the 3,900 is a maintenance agreement
Yes, ma'am,
for
it's an
annual maintenance?
It is. Unfortunately, all of our software has some type of
Right.
maintenance agreement.
Right. I would expect that. Okay.
Madam Mayor, if I may, just so the city knows, I was driving this very hard in the beginnings when I contacted Patty. The building department is paying the $19,000 for the operational setup of this. It's about a 4-month setup given its complexity. So this is of no cost to the city.
Wow.
At this point, this is coming out of my reserve money and it's authorized under the 553 statute.
Awesome.
So just, that hadn't been brought up yet, just so we
Yeah.
can blow by that.
That's good to know. Thank you. I wasn't aware of that.
Which would have known at the beginning.
Any further questions on this item?
Now I'd like to make a motion to pass the consent item. Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Being none, the resolution passes.
I have a handout here. I apologize for not having this in the packet. It's the backup showing the amendment.
Okay, for the record, we're going on to our old business, Second Street construction project.
Thank you, Mr. Trevor. Thanks, Bill.
Mayor, Commissioners, Bill Tredick, Public Works Director, and I apologize for one other thing, always making things more complicated than they need to be. This is, we're back to Second Street and the extension thereof, and the commission approved in December, Resolution 20-21, to move forward on the project and to consider a non-ad valorem assessment. So we're at a point now where we have to make a decision to go forward with design and permitting if we're serious about building this road in the near future. I worked with CMT. We secured a proposal from CMT, and the proposal is, this is what makes it a little complicated, is that it's broken into two parts, the part west of 2nd Avenue and the part east of 2nd Avenue. And if we do those separately, those prices are in here, and that's what's in the item here today. There is a potential savings of $6,100 if we make a commitment to move forward and combine those. If you want, I can go through it. I'm here today to ask you permission to go through as if they were separate projects and approve a fee of $57,200 in the amendment. However, that being said, if there's agreement to move forward with this as a combined design, we can just issue the purchase order for $51,100, resulting in a savings of $6,100. So I'm asking that you approve amendment number 34 to the continuing professional services agreement between the City of St. Augustine Beach and CMT, formerly known as Stone Engineering, to provide professional engineering services for the extension and improvement of 2nd Street for a not-to-exceed fee of $57,200. And we will, if we opt to combine it, that will come down to $51,100. Now, we'll also need to do a budget resolution, correct? That will be paid for out of impact fees. And so we'll bring that money into the budget, and Patty can discuss that issue if you have any questions about it.
Motion as presented.
I didn't hear that.
Motion as presented.
Are you making a motion? Ben?
Yes.
Oh, okay. We haven't had public comment.
Okay.
I don't,
This is a public comment item?
is there any public
Yes,
comment?
there is. Are we ready for public comment, or?
I think I have a few questions. This amount, does there have to be competitive bids? I thought that for this amount.
There does not, because CMT is our continuing contract engineer, so we can give them the contract because it's within the thresholds allowed by law with the Consultants Competitive Negotiation Act. So as long as they're our continuing contract engineer, we can give them this work. We just have to get proposals, negotiate that proposal. And I did actually find a way to chop it down a little bit. In the first proposal, they had brand new survey, and when I went through some of the old files, I found some old survey that Joe Howell had done, and that brought the price down by a few $1,000s. So we went through a negotiation process to get it down to where it is. And I do want to point out, this is consistent with the dollar amount that I presented in the previous meeting. The nuances of it are a little different, but the dollar amount's consistent. And it also includes some post-design engineering, construction management, inspection, that sort of thing. So it will get us through construction with our consultant. And if we did opt to go to an RFQ, because of the dollar amount, the only other option of then using our continuing contract consultant would be to do an RFQ, which would take a few months to do.
Since we're not getting competitive bids, why would we consider two separate projects instead of all one?
Right.
I put it out that way because there's some uncertainty at this point of whether we're going to do them simultaneously or one after the other, to bid them as one project or two projects. The permitting, there's some nuances in the permitting. The 2nd Street west of 2nd Avenue is included in our stormwater master permit. Widening of the area east of 2nd Avenue is not, so we have to make sure that there aren't any permit considerations that we have to take care of there by widening it to 22 feet and adding curb and gutter and potentially sidewalk. So There are some reasons that keeping it separate might make sense, but if there's consensus to go forward at this time and make this one project, you could approve this for $51,100 if there's agreement to do that.
I don't understand what you just said.
I'm sorry.
And I'm looking at what you've just handed us, right? And you have the two projects on this page, and the combined project over here, but this has a lot more bullet points to it, so to say. Is it the same content in either one?
It's essentially the same content. The second one is the two combined.
Correct, okay, that's what I want to make sure, because it doesn't appear that way. There are descriptions here on the left page, which I don't see over here. I guess that's because they're just combined.
They're combined for the purpose of simplicity. Everything in the two on page 6 is included in the $51,100 in page 7.
Okay, so then you were back to what you were saying that I didn't understand. So you gave us an example at the time of the sidewalk. Can you explain that a little bit further? Why two separate? Because to me, it's just a contract issue, right? If there's two separate projects versus if it's one, and I'd rather save us the $6,000. So how would it manifest that we would lose flexibility with that you were trying to?
If we issue a purchase order to CMT to do work element A,
Okay.
which is just the new pavement, the extension, the $32,250 is the price that it would cost to do that. If we did work element B separately and said, okay, that's done, now let's tackle this piece. And there may be reasons why we want to do it, there may be reasons why we don't. But if we tackle that separately, that one will be $24,950. Now, in the discussions with the consultant, if we combine those projects, there are some savings to be had. There's savings in the post-design services, certainly, because if they're constructed at the same time. There's savings in the bid assistance and a generation of plans, because there's less redundancies. So that's what that $6,100 of savings potential is, by doing one project and not duplicating efforts on some of the tasks.
Gotcha.
And so, I mean, and that's why in my request, I'm asking for the amendment to be for the full amount as if it were separate, but I'm going to work towards combining them and trying to save the $6,100 instead of having to do two separate amendments. That's why I said I make it more complicated than it needs to be, and I apologize for that. But I'm just trying to find a way to make sure that I have the maximum flexibility, and if I for some reason have to separate these out, that I have the ability in the amendment to do that, as opposed to combining them at this time, which we certainly can. I mean, if there's a commitment to doing it as one project, $51,100 is what you should approve Amendment 34 as.
Okay. But so is it your opinion that it's in the city's best interest to approve it as separate, and then you can have the flexibility to kind of create that customized plan for further savings? Or would you say it's in the city's best interest to just save the $6,100 and do it as all in one?
Well, my preference would be to have as if they were separate, and that be the amount that we approve, and we will do everything we can to make the $51,100 happen before I'll combine them in a purchase order if we're moving along in that sense. I mean, that being said, if there's no reason why we can't do the 51-1 now. And if we have, I guess this is where it gets complicated. As we go along, if we try to combine them or if we separate them, it changes things a little bit. If we start combining and then we have to separate, then we're going to have a change order, which I'm not a big fan of change orders. I'd prefer to not have to do a change order to the amendment. If we consider them separate right now, we'll find savings everywhere we can to a maximum savings of the $6,100. So that would be my recommendation. I'm sorry I'm making it more confusing.
Well, I'm not in your field, so I defer to your expertise. I'm trying to understand how what it is that we risk losing, but
So just to break out a piece of it,
I trust your recommendation.
there may be a desire to bid them separately, depending upon the timing.
You mean to different companies, different vendors?
Correct.
Okay.
We may want to do the extension with one contractor and the widening with another because of the timing. We may not want to, and potentially the finances, but mostly for the timing, we may not want to build a section east and then drive new traffic across it to build the piece in the west. And if there's other things that could affect timing of the construction, like permits, if we get held up on the eastern section, we could move forward with the western section, because that really just requires a letter to the Water Management District. So, you know, if they get separated, we won't realize all of those savings. We could still potentially realize some of the design savings, but we won't realize all of the construction savings. And that's why, again, I have it separated out, and we'll endeavor to maximize the savings up to the 6,100. It is confusing, and it's confusing to me, and I've been through it.
And does this money come from the impact fees?
That's the plan at this point, is to fund the design from impact fees, which will be reimbursed, or at least a portion of it would be reimbursed. The area east of 2nd Avenue would not be looked at exactly the same, because that's a widening, and that's appropriate for impact fees. However, it's not appropriate to assess the properties west of 2nd Avenue. So some of that will be reimbursed and other.
So this is essentially everything west of the bike path? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I don't want to prolong the combine, separate discussion, but I'm usually all about flexibility. I can't fathom a situation where we would separate these projects. We're only widening the eastern half because we're opening the western half. So I appreciate you apologizing for making it more complicated than it need to be, but I don't know why we would move forward as a separate project ever. So I really think we should take this from the beginning and do it all as one, save the money where we can. We're not going to widen the eastern half without opening the western half.
And that is an option, to develop them in phases of the same project too, and have the plans. Where it still might hit us if the timing of construction differs for any reason.
Imagine a situation where we're going to inconvenience the residents of the city by having some construction going on and then coming back at another time and doing it more. So I think we keep it simple.
And it would be
I 100%, and I'm having two prices in a contract is uncomfortable for me. Having it all as one with a set price, where the engineers are dedicated to that price unless come back with real good reasons why they can't. I'm very uncomfortable with two different prices in here. So doing it all as one, as expeditiously as possible is where I'm landing.
So Mayor, I'm comfortable saying approval up to 51,100 and then just leaving it at that for the process to just knock it all out at one time. So that way it takes away from the two prices. It shows that we've given an allotment up to 51.1 because that's what we believe we can get it under. And then just do the project simultaneously. It's not a two-phase project, it's just 2nd Street project. Kind of to what Vice Mayor.
Okay. Do we have public comment on this?
We do. Mr. Whitehouse?
Just very quickly for the record, James Whitehouse, St. John's Law Group, 104 Seagrove Main Street here in St. Augustine Beach. As you know, I represent, a number of the lot owners on this particular stretch, and I just wanted to express our thanks for, your city manager and Mr. Tredick. They've both been wonderful working with. I met with them a few times, and this is very great, and we appreciate you moving forward with this, so thank you for your time.
Okay.
Can I just ask one question? So when we're, just for tracking reasons, because we are going to be billing part of this back. There needs to be a mechanism where we are tracking the cost for section 1 versus the widening of the section, the other section. Because we are going to bill a portion of this back to the residents. So for all intents and purposes, we are still going to have to divide this project cost-wise. And I want to make sure that for the finance side of the house, that we have the ability to do that.
Right. This
That's
is
my
an
only
amendment to
concern.
the contract with CMT. And for purposes of the duties and obligations of CMT under this Amendment 34, this is what they're going to do, this is their obligation, this is their price. How we internally track the cost is completely separate, I think. Okay? Mr. Tredick, any?
No, I agree, and we do have a breakdown from CMT as to what the potential savings by combining it are for each task. I didn't include that here, but we just have to tweak out what it is exactly for each one. If we go to the 51.1, I know the total for each, I know the total savings, so we just have to allocate that back to each side of the equation. I don't think it's too complicated to do. I think we can do it fairly easily with CMT.
Well, and there's that question, couldn't we just categorize the 32,250 as the amount toward the reimbursement side? And the city, riding on the coattails of this project and getting the benefit of the savings, because we wouldn't be doing the widening project but for the eastern section. I don't think it's inappropriate or unethical or, misallocation to say, well, the city can absorb that savings. I mean, it's,
That's a fair
question.
assessment.
Right?
Yes.
So, because we're piggybacking on the project, and that's what the project costs on its own. So, that would be my suggestion.
And we can break it down that way. I think that's a fair assessment, and
Okay.
it's true.
I've got another question. It's more into the design side of it, and I haven't brought it up before this point in time because we weren't getting ready to start spending money on the actual design, but the portion of this project where we're widening the existing part of 2nd Street and curbing it and adding sidewalks, it seems inconsistent with the rest of the city. We've got sidewalks on A Street, 11th, and 16th, and the boulevard, and so I'm not understanding why we're going to go through the expense of putting in a sidewalk for essentially one residential block. Why is that? Can someone explain
Our
that?
code does require new roads to be the 22 feet, and the curb and gutter is in our design standards. Certainly, we have non-curb and gutter all over the city. That particular area, to make it drain properly without draining the water in the street or creating a swale system, it needs curb and gutter. There isn't room in that right-of-way to put a roadside swale system that will convey water the 350 feet from A1A Beach Boulevard west to 2nd Avenue. So I think the curb and gutter is going to be almost mandatory to make the drainage work and not have it flow down the roadway. The sidewalk, we have sidewalk in a lot of places. I think 8th, where we put in curb and gutter roadway, that has a sidewalk. There's other areas that have sidewalk. This would be a connector out to the boulevard and eventually to the beach, so don't have to do a sidewalk. I think there was some discussion of that being part of the agreement with the residents at 2nd Avenue too. So there may be some things that make a sidewalk very challenging. There's not a lot of room for it. In looking at it, I think the only place to put it's on the north side of the road, because anything on the south side of the road would impact the driveways and the access to the buildings. So, I mean, we may get to a point where sidewalk is not feasible because of the geometry. But I think there's a benefit to getting the pedestrians off the street. Plus, it serves that whole area that want to walk down to the boulevard from 2nd Avenue and 3rd Street and 1st Street. Well, 1st Street probably wouldn't use it much, but 3rd Street might. So it's going to get some traffic, and it gets the kids out of the street. So there are good reasons to do it. But ultimately, it's the commission's decision whether they want to put in sidewalk on that street.
Commissioner, if you recall, the opposition over the years on widening, extending, not extending, all that, and a lot of our discussion was to finally go ahead, complete this project, and make it a win-win for all the residents on Second Street. And that was one of the reasons why we looked carefully at doing some of the improvements in conjunction with extending back then. And it may be that as other streets come up for extending westward, trying to find the way to improve streets overall, the commission might be looking at that every time we do something like this, to improve the streets and improve our infrastructure.
And I also believe, Mayor, that because it's a new road and a widening of a road, I believe the impact fees pay for the sidewalk. I think it's one of the circumstances that impact fees actually pay for that sidewalk.
That's correct, because it's part of the roadway.
Because it's part of the roadway.
Very good. I just felt like I needed to ask. It was something.
I mean, it's a good question.
It's a great question.
The new subdivision, the Ridge, has sidewalk on one side of the road throughout and curb and gutter. I mean, that is what we're enforcing in development.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions by commissioners at this point? I think, Mr. Law, you have a comment?
Yes, ma'am, just to remind the commission, section 6.02.05 of your land development code, sidewalks and bikeways. Sidewalk shall be provided on at least one side of all residential streets. So just, that's where it's coming from, with the sidewalk in. It's in your code.
So when we touch a street, we want to bring it up to...
Oh, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion, any further public comment or anything on this? Then I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 34, but deleting the separation of work element A and B, using the combined work element on page 7.
I'll second.
Okay, since this is I think we can do it by consensus. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, amendment number 34 is approved with modification.
Thank you.
Do we need to approve of the budget resolution also?
Yeah, there's a budget resolution you need to approve as well.
Okay, where is that? Okay, budget resolution 21-02. I'll make a motion to approve budget resolution 21-02.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, budget resolution 21-02 is approved. Max, next item, holiday season events.
Yes, this item we have broken into two parts. The first is the most recent holiday art walks in the night market. And our communications coordinator and events coordinator, Miss Linda Conlon, is here to give you an update on that. And the second part of this agenda item is our New Year's Eve fireworks show. And I'd like first, though, to go with Ms. Conlon, or give you simply an update, because as you saw likely from my memo, I'm leaning towards more of this kind of art walk event and not a fireworks show. But let her explain what she found out with the art walk events in November and December and the night market.
Thank you, Ms.
everybody.
Conlon.
So as you know, due to COVID, we had to cancel the fireworks show that would be on one night, New Year's Eve. And so what we wanted to try to do is still find a way to support businesses, community. What could we do that could still be considered safe, socially responsible, but bring people to the city? And so what I did was I partnered with people who were already experts in the field. So, for example, I partnered with Paul Slava at the Art Studio, who's done art walks before and done them successfully. So we worked with him, and then I also worked with Julie Olson, who runs the Wednesday Farmers Market, to do the holiday night market. And we are so thankful to them. By the way, we could not have done these events without their support and input and all the work that they did. What we found at the end of the day was that it was very successful. Everybody liked it. The businesses, the artists, the vendors, the patrons, we've had nothing but positive feedback. And in general, it's like, we want more. You know, can we do more of these kind of events? It fits our city, it fits our size, it's community-based. We did have businesses that had record-breaking sales. We had artists that had record-breaking sales at the events, but we even those that did not said, please sign me up, I would like to come back and do these other events. So again, overall, it was very successful, and I'm actually talking right now with Paul at the Art Studio and Julie about doing another art fair, possibly at the pier, and then doing an event maybe in the summertime, like a luau at the pier with the farmers market, like that kind, well, not with, but with Julie, who does the farmers market. And just fun things like that that are community-based, that brings people here, but outside events, safety obviously was in mind when we did these as well. So, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
They were all very good, and actually these art events put us in a better position to ask for grants. They're specifically any kind of art events, and Christina Parrish, of course, with the cultural arts.
Right.
She's looking into, and grants are going to be needed for whatever we are going to do with Pier Park.
Right, and I think you have to remember too that Beach Blast Off was not actually canceled until the end of the September meeting, the end of September. So we pulled this together very quickly. As we move on, it's only going to get better. We'll have more planning, more time, more ability to market, more ability to go after grants, more ability to do that kind of thing with the Cultural Council, which at this point we were just trying to, we were just trying to do something that would be beneficial. So absolutely, as we move forward, it's only going to get better.
Are there any others planned for the rest of this year?
Well, just what I talked about. So we will, and I don't have the actual dates, but we're looking at it. We're looking at doing an art fair at the pier in May, probably May 22nd. And what we would do is we would change it up a little bit. So instead of doing the nighttime, because that was obviously based on the lights, and having it go from afternoon to evening for the lights. So we would try an afternoon one, like a 12 to 5. And then, again, the luau event, I'm looking at probably June 26th. Again, it would be like 4 to 9. And we would have different performers and things like that, but we're just starting that. So yes, we are looking into doing that. And separate from that, but in April, we are going to do a tree giveaway again for Arbor Day at the pier. That was very successful last year. Again, wonderful feedback, and so we're gonna do that again. We've already gotten approval from Julie at the market. She loved having us. So.
What date is that?
I'm looking at Wednesday, April 14th.
Okay.
Yeah, because we'll do it in conjunction with her, and then also possibly do a tree planting ceremony. Again, we'll see what the numbers are like. It wouldn't be a huge thing, but I will definitely keep you all updated and informed, and when I have the solid dates, I'll send the information to Max, and because that would be an idea for Arbor Day too. We do have a couple of trees, and we're looking at possibly Lakeside Park or somewhere at Pier Park. We're also looking to do that in conjunction with the county's 200th. So it was kind of like a fun, like, I don't know, 200 trees for 200 years, kind of do something with their branding as well, because they want us to do something.
So that's April, May, and...
April, May, and June.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I think planning these events and having them is a good thing for the city.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the feedback we've been getting, very positive.
So really, the only real question for the discussion tonight, I think, is Beach Blast.
Is the fireworks show, right?
And are we ready to talk about that, discuss that?
Well, Mayor, I would like to know on the other event, I know on Beach Blast Off, we track all of the city's costs and the city's revenue. Are we doing the same thing for the other events? Because I know there are a lot of organizations that, and I think this is great, what we're doing, it's geared toward promoting the community as opposed to the others who put on these similar shows, but we do have numerous organizers for, let's say, a holiday market, arts and crafts market. We've had those traditionally, either at the holiday time or during the year. There's numerous organizations that do that. So, A, we're getting the benefit for the businesses in the community and collective advertising and promotion. I think that's excellent. But B, I would like to know, what the financial impact is for the city in having, in-house staff and having that bigger time and dedicated, can we track those figures?
Right, and we can probably talk about that more. I will say, for example, with the holiday market this year, Julie Olson basically, the cost was on her. The props were her, the vendors were her. She did all of that. We supported it, we promoted it. So we didn't actually cost us, anything, maybe the cost of a few flyers here and there. And then, of course, my time. So other than that, there was no cost. Same with the art studio. We got somebody else who sponsored the maps that we had, so we didn't pay for that. At the end, I think I ended up with some really nice flyers that I, printed out on my way there and things like that. But the cost to us was minimal. Like, again, my time, so my cost, and that was really it.
In addition to that, we also had one employee from Public Works who was available on site to make sure that the lights were working and if there were any, issues that were going on. So we had Daniel there, and he was there for approximately 6 hours or so.
Yeah, not even.
For each of the 3 events.
Right.
So we had some minimal overtime.
Thank you. Are we bringing in sponsorships for these events also?
Well, we could in the future. That's what I mean. We could absolutely. So for example, we had a local business, the Embassy Suites. They sponsored the lighting up the pier this year.
Right.
So that was more part of the whole light up the beach the whole season.
Yeah.
So we got them to sponsor that. We really, again, with Julie being in charge of the event, and it was on her more to, again, the vendors, the plate. That's how she recouped, and we had the photo ops and all that stuff, and so that was really on her. But absolutely, we could look into sponsorships in the future. That's what the thing is. There's only so many sponsorships, especially local, to go around. There's only so many times you can hit up Embassy Suites. You know what I mean? Like, it's not there. It's not. So depending on what we do with these events and where we go and what we do with the fireworks show, that I think will determine, and then again, getting the grants, the TDC and stuff like that. I think where we go with it is going to determine how that plays out.
And I echo that. I think we did a great job for pulling it all together from September. But going forward, I do think we should have before us, some kind of analysis, right? Of, this much donation was made by this sponsor, or they just paid the cost, and, here's what it cost us. Even if it's just a little bit here and there, just so we know, because that way when we can see the workings of it, then we can help with idea generation on what we can do to target these line items. So, thank you.
And also just recognition of those sponsors and supporters for the work that they did. So I think the commissioner is asking for more after-the-fact financial reporting back to the commission after each event.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and if they're all in the same season, maybe together, together or separate, whatever is going to be less effort, but broken down in a transparent way.
Sure. Okay, that sounds great.
Any further discussion on the events that Ms. Conlon is reporting on?
No, I think they were great. Great job again.
Thank you.
Yes. All right.
Now, New Year's Eve. The staff has met a couple of times regarding this event because it involves so many of us, particularly the police department and the public works department. I'm talking about the fireworks show. It may seem rather early to start the discussion about it, but it takes a lot of planning if we're going to have, well, even as you'll see from the recommendation here, a minimal kind of fireworks event. Because we have to plan for traffic control and porta potties and light towers and things like that. What we have found basically with the Beach Blast Off as it has existed for 12 years, or as it evolved over 12 years, is it has outgrown the space. It is way too large for the Pier Park. So the recommendation, the latest from the staff, is that if you really are keen on a fireworks show, well, I should first preface that by saying we would like to suggest art events, no fireworks whatsoever. Realizing that that may be not well received, have just a fireworks show. So there'd be no kids zone, no beer wine sales, all the things that, no food vendors, all the things that crammed into that Pier Park that brought in hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of people into that one area. I know Sheriff Hardwick, when he was chief here, was very concerned about a possibility of an incident. We were extremely lucky we never had one. Chief Carswell continues that concern. The event is simply too large for that area. So if you are bound and determined to have a fireworks show, then we would just have fireworks shot off at the end of the pier. That would still involve having to get portalettes because you can't get hundreds of people in the city and not have some means or amenity like a portalette. And we would need light towers because the lighting along the boulevard and at certain key intersections is very minimal. You have people coming and back and forth across the road. What might have happened if we just have fireworks is that we would have a lot of people coming to our city in vehicles, and they would park everywhere. We would not have buses from satellite parking lots, because the buses are very expensive, $10,000 to $20,000. We have found out from the TDC that they are not really willing to provide grant money for events that are not related to arts and culture. Well, fireworks are not considered arts or culture.
I take total umbrage with that, by the way. When I read that, I was shocked that anybody would say that.
Yep.
That's ridiculous. There are so many, what do they call them, pyrotechnicians, who would absolutely be insulted that it's not art. I think that is insane.
Well, we have been told that.
I'm not that kind of an artist, but I think there are a lot of them who consider themselves very adamantly artists, so
Well,
I have to interrupt for that
That's
comment.
fine. It's a good point that a fireworks show could be considered art by the way the
It's also cultural.
pyrotechnics go off and all that. But
It's a huge part of United States culture that on the 4th of July, if not New Year's Eve, it's a cultural tradition, to definitely participate in fireworks, even if it's just igniting them yourself, potentially illegally, which so many people did over the years on the beach, right?
Right.
So it is, I think that there is definitely a preference with staff at TDC to try to, thin out how many applicants there are, but I think that's a very sorry argument.
when we go for a TDC grant, we are competing with a lot of organizations for the money. And I believe the last TDC grant we got was $8,000? You recall for the
I think
beach?
17.
It was 17.
17.
We had to spend
That's right.
half of that for advertising.
Yeah, so we got a total of 17,000. We had to spend half of that for advertising to bring in more people to the city when the event is already well populated. So only half of that 17,000 could be used for operational expenses, such as overtime, the porta potties, the light towers, et cetera. So at this particular point in time, we are before you to get your feeling on what do you want to do about a New Year's Eve fireworks show. If you are bound and determined we should have one, then that will give us clear direction as to what we need to do for the next few months. Chief Carswell in particular needs to know, because he will have to make arrangements for law enforcement services to help us on that night. Sheriff Hardwick has said he will continue helping us, or he will continue the sheriff's office helping us. So we will have law enforcement. We will have less public works people, involved, because we won't have the great amount of setup that the Public Works Department had to do. So it'll be just the fireworks at the end of the pier, and I can contact the fireworks company and say, please reserve New Year's Eve for the fireworks show. I really would recommend a shorter show. 30 minutes of fireworks gets sort of boring to me, but maybe I've been to too many of them since 2004 or 5. We used to have a 20-minute show. I always thought that was ample. But anyway, that's not my decision. So at this point, what do you want to do? And I know I may be asking for a quick decision that you're not prepared to make. It could be a decision you may want to make in next month or April, but in discussion with staff, we really need to know by May what you want to do.
And we have to figure COVID too. I mean, Mayor, I
Yes,
think that
true.
whatever decision we make now needs to be, whether it's now or, we're looking, in my mind, we're looking at a one-year decision here. I don't think that it's clear that as of New Year's this year, it's going to be safe for a city to be promoting a large event because of the same issues of last year. I mean, there are new strings and strands of the COVID coming. We've got one from the UK, we've got one from South Africa. We think that they've got a handle on it with the vaccines, but we really don't know. I would suggest that we discuss it just from that perspective of this year, as opposed to trying to create a precedent that all years going forward we're going to, potentially modify things. So.
Well, if I'm understanding, Commissioner, you're suggesting for 2021, given the COVID questions, we don't have a fireworks show.
I think that at this point it's very difficult to make that call. I would not be comfortable, saying that, I agree with you, Max, we should do away with fireworks forever. I could say, I can understand that perspective now because we're still enthralled with all of the horrors of the COVID pandemic. And I'm not confident that will be a neutralized concern by the time September rolls around. It would be very difficult to get the bus moving in time to make it all happen, given, that I don't think any of us could have a confidence level, at least until the middle of the summer, maybe the end of the summer. And then can we get it all done? That might be expecting too much.
I think for the TDC grants, making a decision in the summertime is not feasible.
Feasible, yeah. Right.
Since the grant amount we got initially for last year at least wasn't tremendous, and if the fireworks is scaled back, grant money is not all that essential, particularly where our object is not to bring in more people. In other words, diminish the event somewhat and make it more local as it originally was. It really was just local. It was not meant to be advertised in Tampa and Orlando and Miami.
Has the city of St. Augustine made a decision on their July fireworks yet?
No, they have not.
When do they expect to, or are they putting it off also?
It could be a couple of months before they make a decision.
For the record, Melinda said it might be a couple of months before St. Augustine decides on their July 4th fireworks.
Commissioners, I sat with Melinda for about an hour and a half, if not 2 hours, trying to find a way that we could maintain fireworks. And it may be that this year it's not going to be possible, but I'm not ready to give up on fireworks completely. Find a way. We had even discussed paring it down. The brochures would say, local fireworks, and, trying to find a way to, by the brochures themselves, no alcohol, no this, no that. Buses would be, you'd have to make an appointment, schedule a bus, because everybody would know how to make appointments online now this year. And, only so many availability for shuttles, and it would pay for themselves. They'd have to pay. So that would take care of the shuttles to reduce some of the pressure on parking. But it would be by appointment only, so only so many available, and paid for by people who want to come in a shuttle. It'd be, people could walk to the beach with their chair, and it would be pedestrian fireworks on the beach, and really scaled down, for mostly pedestrians. There still would be additional cost to the city that I couldn't figure out how to pay for it. So we kicked it around a good period of time. But I don't think I'm ready to throw in the towel completely on fireworks, especially if the city of St. Augustine finds a way to do their July 4th. But for this year, I'm not sure exactly what to do, and I just explained what Melinda and I kicked around for a while before, inviting your comments.
I'm glad you did that, Mayor. Thank you for putting that investment in. Those are good ideas about the bookings for the shuttles. That's good. Do you know what the missing fund amount is?
We didn't get that far, but I would guess with the portalets and overtime and other things without vendors, and we don't know what sponsorships would be, but I'm just going to guess around 8,000.
I think you're going to find that it's higher than that. And I'm just going to jump in here.
Okay.
So in the packet that you have before you on page 3, there's a recap of expenses for the previous few years, as well as an estimate on what we would say FY21 would cost. And there are things that we would absolutely have to have, as Max has said, portalets, light towers, and then any type of overtime alone, if we estimated, just the law enforcement staff and some, if not all, of the public works, depending upon what size it is, that alone is $12,000. So I think we're pushing at least 20 for bare minimum. And then trying to cover those costs in the past, the majority of those have been with not so much the sponsors, but the fees that we get from the vendors that are in the area of Pier Park. And so that covers quite a bit of the money. And then the sponsors are pretty much the same ones that give us money every year. And we try very diligently to get as much money as we can. But I think that, we're still looking at a substantial investment in, money that the city's going to have to put out for this event. I think a rebranding, and, we've talked about this, having the small events, continuing those again this year like we did, it just was amazing to have the art walks and the market. At worst case, best case, however you want to look at it, if we did a fireworks show, we rebrand it something like Light Up the Night. It's a culmination in the end of our holiday season with our markets and our art walks, and we allow the Pier Park to be open for parking, so that does give some parking to the public that's coming in, as well as, other parking lots around the city. We utilize our light towers and such to push people down to the access points on the beach. Unfortunately, you don't have to sit right below the fireworks when they go off, so you can spread it. We have a large beach. As long as the tide is right, people can go out on the beach at any point and see that. We've also talked about other options, such as getting with the state park and seeing if they would be willing to leave it open, perhaps charge a fee for people to park there, and then they could too walk out on the beach there and still have a good view of the fireworks, and we certainly could promote that. But I think if we even look at anything such as a fireworks show for this year, the rebranding of it to get away from the beach blast-off and what we all know as beach blast-off as a big party at the pier with music and fireworks and vendors and kid zones, we definitely have to not use that logo this year, so that when people come in, they know that it's changed, but it's still going to be a fun event. I still think we have some challenges with regard to safety, and inevitably people are going to be trying to drive around the city, I think, to find a parking spot, and they will be on Beach Boulevard. Fireworks will start and traffic will stop, and everybody will be looking up in the air to see the fireworks. So logistically, I think we have a lot of other things that we need to look at. But I see us continuing on with the smaller events, and the businesses enjoying those and appreciating those, the residents enjoying and appreciating those.
Patty, on the payroll, the overtime, my recollection is that in the budget, we do budget for overtime, kind of consistent with the prior years.
We have, yes.
Yeah, so we do have that money in the budget. And then also just kind of looking at it briefly, I would imagine that Public Works overtime might be significantly reduced from prior years if we didn't have all the events going on.
The setup and the breakdown, I think we would have some reduced staffing, as we've discussed.
Right.
I think at some point we would still have barricades that would have to go out.
Of course, there would be
things of
some.
that nature. So it may split it up just a little bit. We haven't actually talked about the limited number of hours or staffing that we would have.
Right, of course. But just for, big picture kind of planning at this level, the overtime is in the budget. If, as the mayor said, the individuals that choose to use the buses pay for them and reservations are taken, therefore we wouldn't be, in time to, so that we're not obligated to pay for it if it's vacant, if we get them in advance. Then I think your 8,000 looks to be accurate when you look at the remaining numbers, 8,500 perhaps.
My only concern would be having the buses at our disposal, since they are out of Jacksonville, without a commitment from the city for a certain payment.
Right, so that's just a timing thing, I think, really. To find out what the terms of the contract are for reserving them, and whatever that deadline is, we would have to advertise for reservation cutoff period, and allow a little bit of overlap, just kind of balancing risk there. And again, I'm not sure that any of this necessarily, means for this year, but I'm in agreement with the mayor. I don't want to just throw in the towel on what has become a tradition. I've got more complaints about this, the missing beach blast-off from residents, and they were understanding, certainly, and they were mindful of the COVID, and they wanted to be safe and protect other people as well, but there's definitely a lot of pressure from the community to bring it back.
May I ask, what is the budget for this, that we budgeted for fiscal year '21 for this event?
We didn't budget anything. We had already projected that we were not going to have a beach blast off. So there was zero cost in the budget. We had an offset of $25,000 expense for fireworks and $25,000 recovery from the grant, but it was a zero effect.
I don't
in FY
remember
21's
the
budget.
commission specifically saying for December 21, we would not have beach
We did
blast
not.
off.
We didn't.
We budgeted.
Talking about this past year's
This
budget.
past year, yes, this
Yes,
past
ma'am.
year, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. For this fiscal year, we didn't have anything in there other than the fireworks. Everything was a zero cost.
Beach blast off that we're talking about is not in a budget yet. That's in next year's budget.
It would be in next year's, which is why we would need to know the direction of the commission for May when we start putting together the budget numbers and, what we're looking at.
Okay. Other commissioners' thoughts?
I just had a couple. Obviously, the cost, safety, benefit to residents because it's grown, and then a benefit to businesses. And I think what we're forgetting as well is the pier is St. Johns County. So at any given time, they can say, you're no longer shooting fireworks off our pier. And so I think we've got to be prepared, especially they just put money into renovating the pier, that at any given time, they can say, no more fireworks on our pier. And so it may stop even with us wanting to continue the beach blast off. I think it was a good idea to do different events, and I think moving forward, I think the City of St. Augustine Beach should look at doing more events throughout the year, not just holiday time, but throughout the year, because I think it was well received. I think businesses, from the feedback I got, businesses liked it, the artists liked it, the residents liked it. So I think that moving forward, I know Jack's Beach does something called Deck the Chairs. They put a bunch of beach chairs, lifeguard chairs, and they have different organizations come and deck the chairs, and they do that throughout the holiday season in Jack's Beach. So I think we can get creative with doing other things. I think it comes down to, do the residents still want the fireworks? Because I've heard some who are very disappointed we did not do it. And then I've heard some that said, thank you for not doing it because we couldn't go to dinner on the boulevard, or we could not do it. So maybe the timing of it, maybe it's not a New Year's tradition, maybe it's the kickoff to the holiday season when we light the tree. So I think there's opportunities to expand on what we've done. But I'm with Mayor and Commissioner George. I don't want to say no to fireworks yet, but I think we have to be prepared that the county could say no to it. And then what do we do at that point?
Well, if I just want to say that I support the fireworks, and this is a tradition for many of the residents. I don't recall seeing as many residents coming out with chairs and making a walk to the beach for the fireworks that I do for the arts and crafts, whatever we had along the boulevard. So it is something that I know that I understand the concern this past year for the COVID and promoting a large event at municipalities. I understand that, but for Christ's sakes, we're having a Super Bowl now. So I'd like to move forward with continuing this tradition. If it's a lesser scale, I completely understand that. We have many of the folks understand coming to St. Augustine and visiting. Parking is an issue. I'm sure they understand also Uber and Lyfts. So I would hope that we would continue to plan with the understand it's also a burden on staff. 100%, and I understand having been a staff member myself, challenges to great events like this bring those issues that it makes it hard to support. But we're here for something that I think that the public enjoys. So I 100%, and if the county doesn't see that permission at the pier, then I'm sure we can come up with a different alternate location if need to be. But that's what my comments.
Vice Mayor.
I too support doing everything we can to continue the event. I think it's one of the things that adds to the community, and that's part of what we're here to do, right, is just bring things to the community that make it better, that the residents enjoy. I think the success of the event is testimony to how the residents and people outside of just St. Augustine Beach, the county, feel about it. It keeps growing. I don't ever remember a Beach Blast-Off wrap-up discussion where we said, boy, that really sucked. You know, it was always, hey, it got bigger, it got better, we added this element to it, we added that element to it, and it just keeps improving. So to say, hey, let's not do it anymore, I think, you know, it's a lot of years and years of hard work to build a tradition. Having said that, I don't think the art walks and all of these other events in Beach Blast-Off are mutually exclusive in any way. I love the fact that we're bringing new ideas to the community, because again, we're just adding events to the community that they can embrace, and we absolutely need to continue that, but that doesn't, because we have those events, doesn't mean we give up the others. So I'd like to see us continue to try and pursue it. I know it is a burden on the staff, absolutely is. If there are things that we can do, like a couple of years ago where we took some of the accepting cash and things like that out of the equation, we put that on the vendors, that made it easier on staff. I think we can continue to look at ways to do that also. So let's just keep refining it, and I think we trudge forward. You know, COVID is the wild card here. Other municipalities are dealing with it. So they're figuring out how to do the Super Bowl with it, but it's not the same Super Bowl, right? It's adjusted. So I think we need to, that's a very fast-moving wild card, right? So we'll keep our eye on that. But I think at this point, let's keep trudging forward.
Thank you, commissioners, for your thoughts on this and your support. I think if we really work hard on this, we can find a way to reduce it, scale it back a little bit, make it more pedestrian, more local. Melinda and I had almost sketched out the poster for it to make sure everybody knew it was more local. And I think we continue to work real hard at finding a way and then putting some money in the budget for an event this year, subject to last-minute cancellation due to COVID. Okay, so...
And Mayor, I think we should pursue the same grant that we've received in the past. You know, I don't think there's any reason not to, especially since we will need to do advertising in order to get the messaging out about the changes.
Right.
So those advertising funds will be critical, and that, you know, $8,000 in operating funds that we get from prior, we probably won't get as much, you know, frankly, but that'll be critical and fill that necessary gap, so.
And I can tell you, the more events we have in the arts and culture, it will pay off when eventually that fire station moves, when eventually we have to face doing something with the old city hall. We'll be going to the state, we'll be going to the county, we'll be going to whatever grants we can get for that piece of property. So it's really important to keep having some events and keeping the community involved in the arts and culture here. So again, thank you. Okay. Any further comments on this item? Max and Patty, any questions from us? Here, okay, all right. Ordinance 21-01. Mobile food sales.
Yes, ma'am, you saw this last month, but given the amount of changes, the ordinance was not proceeded. The city attorney has drafted a new ordinance for your review that hopefully encapsulates all of your concerns and questions.
Did we take public comment on discussion of Beach Blast-Off?
We did not take public.
Do we have any cards?
There were no cards.
Okay.
Mr. Whitehouse is good.
Okay, all right, sorry. Okay, so ordinance 21-01, looks like a lot of the changes we suggested last time have been made. Looks pretty good. Any commissioners have comments? Start over on this side.
Thank you. The only comment that I had, which I already shared with Mr. Taylor and Mr. Long regarding the trucks remaining overnight, and as listed on paragraph B, L of page 8, overnight parking of mobile truck is allowed on private property. And as Yeah, I have a tendency to think that these things become an eyesore and become permanent structures. To be honest with you, I completely object to the fact to have any type of food trucks along A1A Beach Boulevard. I wish that we could limit them to just A1A. We have a lot of good restaurants along the route on Beach Boulevard, and I'm sure with the pedestrian traffic as it is, walking past one of those in the way to one of our restaurants that are here in our city limits wouldn't be something that may not be perceived very well. But otherwise, I'm fine with that other than that.
I thought we saw some other ordinances that prohibited overnight parking, and I forget what we said last time on overnight parking. It came up.
Yeah, I thought we had said to prohibit it if we can. I think that was the issue.
Yeah.
Can we?
The issue that came up when I was starting to think about it, and we could definitely amend it out if you want, is we have hours of operation that are in there that, I forget, that go to 10 p.m., so it can't operate all night. And if there's not adequate light, then they stop at dusk. But my thinking was that if Oasis decided that they wanted to have a food truck and put it out at their house, in their parking lot, or park their parking lot there might be some commercial properties that wanted to park their truck on their commercial property at the end of the night after they had been somewhere else. And that parking overnight would be an issue for them for that. So that was my thinking, is that that some of these things would have a home on some commercial property. They would end up at after they had been someplace till 6 or 7 o'clock and quit doing their run, they'd then move it, and they would move it to one of our commercial properties. That may not be a real issue with the demographics that we have here, but that was my thought.
Well, keeping the food trucks in operation hour to a certain point, that just means you shut the door and you go home. You leave the food truck on site. That's what I'm opposed. I don't understand why a restaurant that's already established would be serving food outside in a food truck.
You misunderstand the logic. If Oasis had a mobile food truck and they used it in other places, at the end of the night, they might want to park it back
It's
at Oasis.
not done now.
Yeah,
So
that was my thinking.
that alludes to storage. So I understand the logic, and I'm opposed. The boulevard is in a type of condition that it should remain, not to be too look like storage units with a bunch of trailers.
So then, if it was prohibited, that would mean no mobile food truck could be stored anywhere in the city. What about wood screening? I mean, is the issue screening, or is the issue not having them stored overnight on private property in the city?
Well, we do prohibit trucks parking overnight in the city, don't we?
No.
Well, keep in mind, this is the commercial sector.
Yeah.
It's a different ballgame. I don't know if you specifically have a city code that prohibits a mobile food truck from being stored overnight on a commercial zoning. Because I can tell you, if Oasis had one in their parking lot to the south, I wouldn't even think to make an issue of it, because it's a commercially zoned property. And we do see some commercial zoning where they have, lift trucks. They just kind of hang out over there.
Right, no, absolutely.
So I think maybe, and obviously this would be a city attorney question, if the city is opposed to a mobile food truck, just ban it. Just say overnight parking's not prohibited, but I'm not sure how that would, you could end up with a hold on.
Yeah, for the record, I do not think that there is a reason that you couldn't prohibit it. That was the technicality that I was trying to balance, is hours of operation, and then what do they do after they're done, where do they go, and whether we want to let them stay there after that or not.
Another option is, if you decide to ban them or prohibit the overnight parking, they could always apply for a variance. And then the Planning and Zoning Board could come with screening. It may have to be enclosed, so that is another avenue if there's a unique case. But keep in mind, we don't have a lot of places to park a mobile food vending over the night. We've already prohibited them at single-family residential buildings. So you have one viable property, and we talked about it in great detail last month. I don't see a reason to rehash properties on F Street. because we still don't know what's going on with those.
But isn't that within 500 feet? And that was going to be one of my questions, is there any place that is not within 500 feet of another restaurant?
There's probably, I would say when you start getting south of A Street, potentially there, you could open it up. But I mean, we have right in there, you should not operate within 500 feet of an existing restaurant without written approval of said restaurant. So I would say definitely from A Street north, you're probably going to be prohibited from operating.
I mean, maybe, or, and then Publix has restaurants, and Guy Harvey has restaurants, and there's no commercial, I don't think there is anything. I mean, is that going to be a problem? Are we going to be sued?
Well, I would say the restaurant within 500 feet, if you wanted to put one in the commercial property north of Tides that hasn't been developed yet, if they had Tides restaurant permission, then they would be in accordance with our code.
Right, but it requires that private permission.
Right, which
So
is...
effectively, we're banning them, is kind of my point.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying I'm opposed to that,
Yeah.
but we are effectively banning them. Also, if we add in a provision of no overnight parking shall be allowed, then that makes it commercially nearly and probably infeasible. Likely, maybe not. I suppose you could find cheap storage parking elsewhere, but
But the 500 feet is acceptable and approved based on approval from those restaurants within 500 feet. I don't call that being banned.
well,
It requires a restaurant to allow that food vendor to be there, correct?
Right, as I recall from last month, and correct me if I'm wrong, this came to pass because I believe originally we had, you can't serve the same style of food.
Yeah.
Well, restaurants serve more than one style of food.
yeah.
So where was the delineation point? So the solution was to ban it by lineal feet.
I'm in favor of making it as restrictive as possible. I'm just remembering back to some of the League of Cities conferences over the years that I've been to, where the cities' ordinances failed after challenge because they were effectively making it impossible to establish a business of whatever kind within the city limits because of restrictions like these. So I'm only raising the question to get our legal advice on if it's okay, then I'm all for it. If you think we're getting risky, then I would, I think it's important for us to discuss.
Yeah, I have seen several cities do similar similar rules in their ordinances. I agree at some point you hit a level of impossibility that creates the ability for there to be a lawsuit. So it's not impossible, but it seems to be that this is a standard that Florida cities are using.
Okay.
So I wouldn't think we would be alone, if that makes sense.
And that's important.
And if you're concerned about it, you might want to reduce it from 500 to say 300 or 250. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of arbitrary, but that's the number that I had seen several use.
If they're using it, then I'm fine with it. And you're right, Commissioner, the other exception is there if you can get permission. So that's fine.
I think the issue with the overnight or 24 hours or 48 hours that it has to be moved, and we don't want to, like in Nalu's where it hasn't moved in years, right? That's my concern about it, not somebody parking in their commercial parking lot. It's more of, hey, I got permission, now I'm going to park it here and never move it. So I'd be in favor of having the overnight restriction.
Okay.
I agree with that too. The other question I have for attorney is what if we did nothing and just say, what's the risk of them filing something and then we have to come back and put an ordinance in? We just did nothing initially and said, okay.
I don't know, I'm obviously not an attorney, but this was a mandate from Tallahassee.
Sure, but someone still has to, I mean, Tallahassee's not going to come here and check on us. So the question is if we do nothing, say we don't allow them, and then have somebody have to come back to try to fight us to say, why did you stop us? Why are you prohibiting us?
No, we want to get ahead of it, definitely.
They would threaten to sue, then we'd have to do a knee-jerk reaction, and then we'd look silly on the front page of the
I just wanted
paper.
to ask, because I get it's a state mandate, but I also understand, if we go down the rabbit hole where we have so many exclusions where they don't want it, what's them to stop us from doing anything at that point too?
But if we don't regulate, then we could have a
Thousands.
ton of overnights, and then now we're creating a bigger issue by trying to adopt and essentially kind of taking away somebody's established business standard.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
No, I just wanted to throw that out there if we did, because I know that was something that I think initially someone had brought up, if you did nothing, then what happens? And then, but I agree with the overnight, I agree with the stuff to limit or make it as restrictive so we don't drive down the boulevard and see a Nalus on every corner. Not that I don't like Nalus, but it's just so we don't see them on every corner.
No offense to Nalus, I'm sorry.
We could say Crave, the old Crave too downtown.
It's easier to restrict and then ease up
It is.
versus,
To
you
go
know,
the other way.
they get used to overnight parking and then we try and take it away.
Correct.
So maybe we can amend this to say BL, overnight parking of mobile food truck is prohibited on private property, period. Then we'll leave the next statement in, overnight parking on public property is prohibited.
Right.
Page was that?
Okay.
Page 8. You got that, Lex?
What's with that explicit written permission from the city? Now that we're talking about it, it just kind of jumped out at me. Who would issue that permission?
It was, I think that's a leftover that is now covered duplicatively in, am I missing a
If we
page?
had a special event of some kind.
Sure.
Correct, it's special event permits and,
Okay,
yeah,
that
that's
makes sense.
actually would only be special event, that's like contemplating special event permits.
Is it stated somewhere whether the city manager or the city commission is the one authorized to grant that permission?
Special events now are granted by me. We have to go out and count
Fine.
existing parking spaces. We have a whole section in the code on it with the special permit.
Okay, so you can take a look at that, make sure they match up in case you need further language.
So like a beach blast off, that's a special permit. To have all the food vendors and stuff at the pier.
Last one I've done was at a bank. I went and walked over there, counted the parking spots, it complied, and that was the end of it.
Okay.
It was $50, I think that's what the fee, it hasn't changed in quite a while.
Any further questions or comments on this? Do we have any public comment on this?
Not unless Mr. Whitehouse wants to speak.
Now, I have a question for the attorney. So in section C on page 9, this is just so I know if I have to change another code. All portions of section 3.11 may be set aside for any particular parcel in the city via conditional use permit.
I think I'm missing page 9, so I can't look at it, so I'll come over.
You're welcome.
So C1.
No, what was that, Brian? What was your question again?
So you're alluding that all portions of this section may be set aside for a particular parcel in the city via conditional use permit. Do we need to amend the table of uses? So we have permitted mobile food dispensing vehicles in the commercial sector.
Right.
We have nothing telling me to get a conditional use.
You don't, it would be a special use to,
Right, but I can't just say you need a conditional use. I have to have a mechanism to get me there. So do we need to create, is there an intent? Like, are we talking, like we're going to run a permanent food truck business? Is that what the intent of that is with a conditional use?
that would be, is like, like it would be, the intent of that would be like the place that's over there across
From McDonald's on
McDonald's, yeah. And I don't know that the city would ever want to do that, but that was what I had, that was the idea, is if there was ever a property that wanted to be generated that way, that has the bathrooms in the middle and then 2 or 3 food trucks around it, that you could allow it theoretically.
But I still have no mechanism for staff to tell you you need to fill out a conditional use permit. That's my question. How do I get to the planning and zoning board followed by the commission?
I see what you're saying. In the
I
table,
don't have the
there's...
starting point.
Yeah, there's no C anywhere for any, it's just permitted in, I see the P in your table, where it's permissible.
But now if we're prohibiting parking overnight, does it kind of go away on its own?
Yeah, I don't see a conditional use permit for,
Right, there is one. It was intended for drive up, truck, stop or trailer, serve your food and go home.
Yeah.
So in this case, if we're going to prohibit parking, we know we're not going to have a a scenario like by Aqua East where those vehicles stay permanently. So it's either we make it all go away and then they can still apply for a variance against prohibited uses in the city code.
I can't even imagine a variance.
Oh, it would be fun.
I can't imagine the hardship.
Brian, is your recommendation to strike that part?
My recommendation is to strike that section and not even give them an option and let the applicants use the variance process.
Yeah, okay with that.
Then we can just renumber number 2 to number 1.
Correct, yeah. You still leave the special permits, but yeah.
I just cannot see how you get a variance out of a mobile vehicle.
That's their right, though. They can apply and have their glory. So anyways, my recommendation is we make the changes that we talked about, read the ordinance, and let me get it to the Planning and Zoning Board in a couple weeks. Then you would have 2 more months of readings, because it is a change to the Land Development Code.
Since we're not doing a reading on this, where it's got to be amended again,
Well, you could read the ordinance as amended, then that would give me the authority to take it to the Planning and Zoning Board. Then it would
Okay.
come back next month, followed by the following month for the final reading. So if I recall, we made, before we read the, just so we can recap,
okay?
we prohibited overnight parking in public and private in section L on page 8, and we struck through section C1 and renumbered C2 to C1.
All right, somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 21-01 with the aforementioned changes.
Second.
And we need to
Read it in.
Read the preamble?
Okay. Ordinance 21-1, an ordinance of the City of St. Augustine Beach, Florida, making findings of fact, creating the city's policy on mobile food dispensing vehicles in land development regulations, Article 2 of St. Augustine Beach, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict, providing for codification, and providing an immediate effective date.
Roll call vote then, Beverly?
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Torres?
Yes.
Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Rumble?
Yes.
Mayor England?
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Snow? Yes. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Ordinance 2102.
Yes, ma'am. Ordinance 21-02 is to adopt the school board's 5-year district plan. This went to the Planning and Zoning Board at the last meeting and was unanimously recommended approval, 6-0.
I'll make a motion to adopt the comprehensive plan for the school board 5-year.
Second.
Do we have any public comment on this?
No public comment cards?
All right. So we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion?
I heard the second. There was a second already.
Is there a second? Okay, all right. Then need a reading of the preamble?
Yes, Mayor. Ordinance 21-2, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of St. Augustine Beach, Florida, adopting the St. Johns County School Board's 5-year district facilities work plan by reference into the capital improvements elements of the City of St. Augustine Beach Comprehensive Plan, adopting an additional capital improvement into the capital improvements elements of the City of St. Augustine Beach Comprehensive Plan, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severance of invalid provisions, and providing for an effective date.
Roll call vote, Beverly?
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Rumble?
Yes.
Mayor England?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Samora?
Yes.
And Commissioner Torres?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
The only thing I have to want to remind our finance director is Section 3, adoption of additional capital facilities within a 5-year plan. You may want to think about adding something next year for the old city hall. Got to get that old city hall in a 5-year plan. Okay? Because it may not make it, it's not this year, but 26, it would get in there. Okay. Ordinance 21-03, vacating an alley.
Yes, ma'am. Last month, we discussed vacating the alley between 13th and 14th Street. Keep in mind, this is in the middle of Beachside Diner parking, and it goes west. You approved it. The city attorney has drafted an ordinance. Vacating alleys that go through two different subdivisions, the Menorca subdivision and Atlantic Beach subdivision, do get a little trickier to describe, just because of the way that they're platted and the way the parcel ID numbers are different and so on and so on. I recommended to the city attorney that we attach a GIS imagery. So you'll see on page 5, the blue ink, that is the vacated alley, so there's never a doubt what was vacated.
In our discussion last month on this, the motion was to approve it, preserving the municipal use and utility easement, including but not limited to language. We were going to add to this, but I don't see it in the ordinance.
Yes, ma'am. In section 2 on page 3, it talks about subject to the reservation of the city of St. Augustine Beach of a public utility easement over the entire alley to be vacated. That was a consolidation, I believe.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure that gets to what our motion last month. That including but not limited to drainage property rights. I'm at the bottom of page 2. Yep.
It definitely can say whatever you want. You can amend the ordinance. And the city attorney drafted it so we can lend any technical assistance that's needed.
I think that the utility easement covers drainage issues like you're talking about. I don't think you could do anything that would disrupt the easement. I think anything that you would do that would disrupt drainage would also disrupt the utility easement. If you would like further clarification, I don't think it hurts it either to put the drainage language in there, and I'd be happy to do it. So I just would look for guidance from you. I think it makes little to no legal difference.
But I would like to, I would like to remind the commission that this is not a drainage easement. Never has been. It's not platted for it. It's not designed for it. It is a landlocked strip of land that exists between 3 on the north, 3 on the south, and on the east side it's abutted by an asphalt parking lot.
And once it's vacated, it's most likely going to be policed by the neighbors against each other, by civil actions against each other. So if someone were to do it, that's most likely the action that's going to actually fix something, is that they're creating drainage problems for their neighbors.
So I have no access allowed to go view this. I would be infringing on private property.
Is there any other municipal use? I remember that specific language, and I see that here, preserving municipal use and utility easement.
All right, the big thing, the easement is being, the big thing's being used for 3 FPL poles with 3 transformers that are rear feeds on the house. That's the, right now, that's what it's being used for.
But, I mean, could be any other municipal use other than easement, I mean, utilities, and you think the public utility is broad enough for, yeah?
It's pretty broad, and it covers a lot. Bill, can you think of any other municipal uses?
We have no intention of using it for any of our public works infrastructure, so I can't think of any. The drainage was the only thing that we talked about in the last meeting, and some concerns of people obstructing the drainage flow.
But I didn't mean for this lot in particular, this alley in particular. Question is, are there any other uses you've ever seen reserved as an easement on alleys other than utilities?
If it provided access to a pond, maybe, like a drainage pond, where we would need to deploy small boats for cleanup, maybe something like that. But in this case, like I said, it's landlocked on both sides. It's
Yeah, that's, again, right,
Yeah,
bigger
I can think of
picture.
some for
Gotcha.
non-landlocked, you might use it for access. by pedestrians to something.
Sure,
But that's about the only thing I could think of.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what if the lots, there was a drainage problem there and the city decided there needed to be a rain garden there?
A rain garden,
Wanted to
make a swale.
make a swale? Could we do that with this language?
Well, keep in mind, you still have 3 FPL poles there in this specific case. But once again, are you subjected to a public utility easement, a swale you could consider as a utility?
Okay.
But I don't see
That
us...
would not be prohibited to help with water, gathering near homes.
Keep in mind, if I didn't permit any of those houses, but if I did, that would be a type A drainage. Those would drain to the streets. Because you can't drain to the back where it can't go anywhere. So we would slope the properties like we're seeing north of the Marriott that are under construction. Those are sloped from that vacated alley to the streets, and it'll be picked up in the street. But in this case, this development staggers through the years, just like everything else. And as the city attorney mentioned, if somebody goes in there and brings in all kinds of dirt, they're going to be calling, and we'll go out. But we're not saying that they can't clear it, put their fence on their new line, and enjoy the space. They won't be allowed permanent construction of any kind. So if there is a drainage easement, they can always do a little swell on their own and pump it to the front, which is not unheard of. We're starting to see it, more and more of that. They just do a little sump pump and pump it out to where it drains.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Okay, well then I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 21-03.
Second.
Reading of the ordinance.
Ordinance number 21-03, an ordinance of the City of St. Augustine Beach, Florida, making findings of fact, vacating a portion of the public alley located on the west side of A1A Beach Boulevard between 13th and 14th Streets, adjoining lots 22 through 27, Menorca subdivision, and lots 65 through 67 and 78 through 79, Atlantic Beach subdivision, within the City of St. Augustine Beach, Florida, authorizing recording of a certified copy of this ordinance and providing an immediate effective date.
Beverly, if you'll take our votes.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor England?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Zamora?
Yes.
Commissioner Torres?
Yes.
Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Rumble?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, now Beverly, we're up to you, personnel manual changes.
Good evening. The first one that we are doing is adding section 12.15 for infectious disease preparedness. Being that we've had the pandemic and we're not sure how long it's going to be going for, I felt that it's necessary to put in the personnel manual what we're doing to help with follow the CDC guidelines and so forth. In this policy, it says that we require testing and quarantine. If there's a negative result, then it would be, the employee would be out for 7 days. If it's a positive, they'd be 10 days or longer, depending on its condition. For this reason, we're asking staff to cross-train in order to have employees step in if another position is ended. We also had, at one point for the budget analysis, we did have the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act under the Families First Corona Response Act, but that did stop. That was 80 hours of paid sick leave if you were testing or had to be quarantined. But that did stop on December 31st. The Extended Family Medical Leave Act pays the employee 2/3 of their salary if the employee needs time off due to COVID-19 and has been employed with the city for 30 days or more. That will expire on August 31st, 2021. In addition, I asked surrounding counties, the city of St. Augustine, they are actually paying the 80 hours even though it has stopped, and then some, depending on how far, the health of the employee. So they are continuing to do it. I did check with St. Johns County since the books went out, and they are not doing it. They are keeping with they'll use their sick leave and their vacation time if needed.
So do we have a short-term sick leave policy, that if you miss more than 6 days, it goes into a short-term policy where for so many days you're paid 100% and then it drops to maybe the 2/3 or whatever? Do we have short-term?
We don't have a short-term. We accrue as we go. I believe we get 8 hours per month. So, it accrues, I believe, to 96 hours, is it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, 96 hours per year that you're here, and it does accrue. Also your vacation time. So basically what this is, and it's up to you to decide if you want to continue with having the city pay for that, or if you want to just have them use their sick time and vacation. If it's there, remember that we do have a donation of employee time, where if an employee wants to contribute to another employee's sick time, they can do that with certain ramifications on that, on how to follow that, which that's going to be coming to you next month. Procedures on that.
To answer your question regarding short-term disability, we do offer that as an option that the employees can pay for, but it's not something that the city provides.
Okay.
In addition to the sick days, that's all the city does get.
And does sick leave rollover?
They can maintain up to 960 hours on the books.
Okay.
So, does anyone have any questions, or do you have any questions on the resolution?
Say again what's in here for paying.
I believe,
Paragraph G?
yes. Paragraph G, it does say, employees will receive their accrued sick, vacation, and employee compensation time while not working during the declared pandemic. That's standard. If an employee is out longer than the employee has accrued sick time, the city will continue to pay the employee for time missed without notification. So I don't know if you want to keep that, or if you want to just say the employee will use the sick time, their sick time or vacation time, depending on how long they are. Now remember, the police department are essential, so they aren't even in this policy. They are under workers' comp, and workers' comp pays for them. However, the other employees, they have to follow this policy. So it's whatever the commission would want.
So if they're out with infectious disease or during the pandemic, during the declared pandemic, they have to use whatever accrued sick and vacation time they have. And
Well, they can go on extended Family Medical Leave Act.
that's without pay.
The extended one is 2/3 pay.
Okay.
From the federal government. So they can go on that if they're out an extended amount period, long
Say an
term.
employee was out a month with the virus.
Yes, they could go on that, and that's through the federal government. They allocate that for all employees. So we could do that. So they do have an option if they're out a certain amount of time. However, if they want to make their full salary, they would have to use their sick time to make up that 1/3 or percent to make that up. And that's only good through August. So August 31st. And then after that, I don't know, every day it changes, or every little while, it seems like it changes. So it depends on what they decide, but they didn't continue with the 80 hours any longer after December 31st. They were giving you 2 weeks to recoup. And that way, it kind of helped the people that needed to work, but would be out of, didn't have enough pay. They would try to, supplement that a little bit. But with the Extended Family Medical Leave Act, you could still
Still have
do
the
that,
job.
at least for 2/3, yes, and your job and so forth. You wouldn't lose your job.
All right.
And I think, Commissioners, too, as well, in the latter half of G, it does say that we are going to allow the employees to go into a negative situation with their vacation and sick, and I thought management staff had decided that we were not in agreement with that, but
We can, brought it to your, whatever you always want to do, so if you want that striked, we can do that.
I think that's a little risky. Yeah, that makes me a little nervous.
Okay.
And that second sentence there, that it says the city will continue to pay the employee for time missed after they've used up their accrued time, I think will is the wrong word.
Okay.
Either strike that whole sentence. The thing is, if there's an emergency situation and we have the funds, we can make the decision at the time to, help people out, but I don't want to create an expectation and an entitlement.
I understand completely,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I brought it to you so you can make that decision.
Yeah.
But as I said, St. Johns County isn't doing it, and, but the city of St. Augustine is, so it's totally your call, what you all want to do.
Well, that's my thoughts on those. I don't know if anybody else feels otherwise, but it looks like they might feel the same.
I share the same feelings as Commissioner Undine.
My feelings probably go a little bit broader. I'm somewhat uncomfortable with the specificity of this. If this is supposed to be a COVID-19 policy, or if this is supposed to be as it says in the title, procedures for COVID-19 or other communicable diseases, everything I'm reading here is extremely specific to
COVID.
what we know right now of COVID, not even going beyond that. So I'm kind of uncomfortable with the whole thing, to be honest.
For example, if they're exposed and they have to stay home for 14 days, that may change.
Oh, it changes all the time.
So references to
2 weeks.
CDC guidelines, because what if a person who has been immunized they may not need to stay out. CDC may change that 14 days, so
And I don't believe we need a policy the Extended Medical Leave Act, we don't need a policy. That's available. That's out there, regardless of our policy.
Okay, if you prefer not having it, I don't have to, we can take the whole thing off. No problem.
I think it's a compelling point.
I'm fine with that, too.
So we'll just skip that one.
Commissioner Rumwell, what
I think
say you?
Vice Mayor Samora, that's a good point. Should we have something in there? Probably, but I think maybe broaden so it's not COVID specific.
And I'd be fine with that, and maybe we probably do need to develop something that's a little bit broader.
It's just hard to know what to
What's the next
do
thing?
because you don't know what's happening, and so I mean, I could do one on tuberculosis if you want, or something like that, but it's kind of,
What
it's
about-
all Pacific. you
What
know?
about one that's just for pandemic? That's just covers the pandemics and then whatever, I guess, to try to lower the specifics, just whatever the guideline, I mean, because I guess they change all the time, so it's even hard to do it that way.
It would be impossible because they change. And right now, this is what the general, synopsis is of everybody, from what SHRM and from other agencies have done. So I'm just kind of following that. But if you feel uncomfortable with it, I just wouldn't do it.
Where did you get this? Did you use a
Mostly
sample?
from SHRM.
Okay.
And different things. It's all online with the CDC and so forth.
Do you think you could find something as an example that's more broad for a declared emergency, pandemic?
I'll look, sure, and if
Okay.
you want, I'll bring something back, but I'd have to look and see if there's something. Otherwise, I'll let you know,
Okay.
I'll keep you updated on
Because
it.
it is very specific where it says how long an employee has to stay out if they're just exposed and
That's by CDC guidelines.
Right. And we run a very slim staff, so.
Yeah, we do, and, that's the problem.
If an employee gets sick, and actually sick and they're out for an extended time, I think there's plenty of benefits to pull off of that are federal. But just for exposure, or if it's just a couple of days, maybe we can find some way to make it more general.
Okay, I'll try and keep you updated on that.
Okay.
Okay, on the second one is regarding incentive pay. Employees are working for the city, spend time improving their skills and education for their positions. Incentive pay has the potential to raise morale and increase job satisfaction. Basically, this is, as you can see, if you look on the department-approved courses, what each department decided that they felt was necessary for each one of these, certifications or degrees that they would like to go towards their salaries. And it's up to you, but I truly believe that right now we are much lower, and you'll see this in March. We are bringing a salary survey to the commission that I've been working on, and most of the positions are very low. Those people that are trying to increase their skills and their knowledge, I think we should reward them, as normal within the best practices of other cities and so forth that we've seen this in. St. John County does this, St. Augustine does this, and our sister city. So I just believe that it's a morale booster for hard work that they're putting forth their own effort to do.
And we do not have progressions in our, well, we do some, but as a general rule, for a lot of our positions, since we are minimum staff, we don't have progressions in the job description.
Correct. So let's say, we have, let's say my example, we have a master municipal clerk and we have the certified municipal clerk. So that is a progression, but you have to go to school for a number of years in order to get each one of those. And that's why the incentive is there. There's the same with, let's say, the finance or the building department. They have to reach a certain level in order to get certified in the building department to do certain jobs. And so if you don't have that certification, you can't go out and inspect, you can't go out and do some of the code enforcement and so forth. So it is important that they have that. And I feel like as a morale, and also because we don't pay the best, I will say, it would be a good thing to do to help with people that are spending their time working on getting more skills. And it helps us professionally.
Anyone have any questions about this one or want to discuss?
These are one-time bonuses, or these annual salary enhancements?
They're salary. They're put in your salary and increase.
So you have that $1,000 divided for that year?
One time.
Continuation, just like the police department does with the Florida statutes. They do the same
So their
thing.
salary is increased by the $1,000 going
That's
forward?
ongoing. Oh, I thought it was
Yeah, I
one
thought this is a
time.
one-time bonus.
Yeah, I did too. It's not clear in the policy. I kind of feel like maybe we should look at this in conjunction with the pay survey. Otherwise, if you're telling us that we should have this because the pay ranges aren't appropriate, well, I feel like we should look at the pay ranges first, because the equivalent might be provided for, if that's coming up in March, did you say?
We're going to have a workshop on it in March, I believe.
Okay. So that's my thought. And in these cases, the city is paying for the education, correct?
Yes.
So the city has provided payment for the tuition and assisted, in that regard to acquire it.
Yeah, depending on, you have percentages depending on your grade average that you get. It's not 100%.
Okay.
It depends on the grade average that you receive.
Okay.
Beverly, I really appreciate you advocating for all the city employees and standing here before us and introducing this. So please don't get my line of questions wrong here, but I really did think it was just a one-time bonus for completing the course. But you've corrected that, I understand that. So, but also if an employee earns a bachelor's degree or has a bachelor's degree, does that mean if this was passed, would that employee now receive an incentive?
No,
It's
it's
just
only,
going
it's
forward.
from going forward.
Okay, thank
So
you.
nobody would receive anything they already have.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Mayor, if I may. If you recall, in 2009, May 2009, the building department came in front of this commission, majority of the commission was here, with this very same thing that you see on page 11 for the building department. And since then, it's been budgeted in. The account, if you recall, it was front page newspaper,
You mean 2019?
I believe it was 2019. Ms. Patty, you remember? I know it didn't start till the
Yes, it
fiscal
was.
year. It didn't start till the following fiscal year because we had a budget for it. This has been a huge success in my department because we're never going to hire more people. So some of these requirements, like Ms. Beverly had alluded to, the building inspector, that's a unique one because that takes the state of Florida to approve another state license. You're not going to see that in this city very often, but these other ones for permit technician, the certified permit tech, the city now has 3, for the first time ever, international certified permit technicians. One of your employees is now one of 62 in the world with the T6 designation permit specialist. Some of them will be moving into floodplain manager. That is a benefit to the city's flood program. You get credit for every floodplain manager. And being a coastal community, it's a huge benefit. The code enforcement officer is very limited in what he or she can do for testing. So the Florida Association of Code Enforcement, you have your first certified female Florida Association of Code Enforcement member. And all this is a direct relation to you seeing the need for this in 2019. So what Ms. Beverly is trying to get is every department should have a way for their staff. The municipal city clerk, the masters, all that, super important. That's their avenue they can go. If you see fit not to grant this after more review, of course, somebody's still going to get the certification, but I can tell you a floodplain manager certification as a new up-and-coming trend in Florida is going to leave and probably start out around 50,000. And they can't fill the positions fast enough. If you look through in finance, I mean, I don't know what this stuff means, but I'm sure Miss Patty could talk about it for great detail.
You don't have a role of a job though for just a certified floodplain manager in our
No, but you
city.
get credit in your audits up to 5 certified floodplain managers, and even a permit technician that's granted or works hard and passes that test. Keep in mind, that's an association of state floodplain managers. They're the ones who administer that. Everybody in the building department has to do flood. That's the way we look at it. Yes, if you recall in 2018 when I presented the new flood maps, it doesn't end there because we're in Florida. So yes, we're getting a great reprieve from the strict requirements of the federal flood program. But it still has to go into play to the coastal construction control line, which now brings in all the rules of Florida floodplain.
But would we have any need to have every single person in the building department to be a certified floodplain manager
I say yes.
for every single
I say
staff
yes,
member?
because we only have 5 people. Zoning, keep in mind, floodplain management affects them. But no, would you expect everybody to get that? Probably not. That's not an easy task to get. That's very hard. People spend careers getting that certification.
I mean, don't we have job descriptions and we want them to meet the qualifications? And if an employee wants to improve their education, their position, then they would be promoted and then they would get a raise to be commensurate with
The problem
that.
is we don't have that mechanism. So take for an example a bigger jurisdiction, let's say, and based on what you're saying, which is good. It works in the bigger jurisdictions. You can have a building inspector 1, 2, or 3. So let's say the county, for example, has, if you're 1 or 2 family dwelling, that means you can inspect residential, you're building inspector 1. Now you get commercial building, that's a building inspector 2. You get another one, then you become building inspector 3. Each one correlates to about 1,000, or I don't have the exact number, but somewhere $1,000, $1,500 increase in your annual salary. But those are unique because those take state of Florida certified. The zoning inspector, building and zoning does zoning. We do property maintenance. So these that were approved in 19 are catered individually to the city as it sits now. As Ms. Beverly had to come up for her department, and I'm sure the police have their own thing from the state of Florida. I just want to let y'all know ours has been a growing success and continue, staff keep moving, but keep in mind, I limit mine to 2,000 per year and I budget. I can tell you the building inspector has only taken 1 exam, and the executive assistant is taking none. As you approach the twilight of your career, you're not going to be blazing the path.
Wait, but you said you limit your budget to 2,000 a year. Do you tell your staff that there's only 2,000 to go around and somebody...
No, ma'am, if you recall in 2019, it's 2,000 per staff.
Okay.
So I budget 12,000.
You couldn't hit all of them in 1 year?
No, ma'am, that was intended for the longevity of the employee's career here at the city. And these exams, the way they're laid out, is they feed off each other.
Yeah.
Right, so, I mean, if we don't add something to this or put some limits on it, it could, between a merit increase and this, it could just blow the budget or put that employee at over their maximum salary.
Right now, one thing you may consider is exactly what we did for my department 2 years ago. We limited it to 2,000 because the department head and the finance have to plan for this scenario. So let's say I have 1 employee, they're brand new, they start testing a year later, I budget 2,000. Well, if it takes them 6 months to get those exams, they're not getting the 2,000, right? Because they're only, it's take $1,000 divided by 26 divided by 80. That's how much we're increasing their pay. So basically, I think $1,000 is about $30 a pay period, is what it is to an annual salary. So the rest of that money, yeah, you budget it, but in the majority of the city, with the exception of my department, it would return back to general funds as a
I'm not sure what they call it, a balance, whatever it's called in the finance world. So, yes, we're preparing for everybody to be super, October 1st, they all, they all get tested. Well, it's not going to work that way.
Sure.
But that's why we limited mine to 2,000.
Are
And
you
if you
saying
notice, I'm not
that's
eligible.
per employee for the duration of their employment or per year?
Per fiscal year, because I have to budget. So I took 6 employees, even though I don't have 6 employees.
They could stack over one year after another, and
Right, that's the intent.
and increase their salary by $5,000-$6,000.
Over 4 years.
And
so.
that'll be ongoing with merits and cost of living adjustments for the rest of the life of that employee, even though the job description is at a particular pay level that, you know, a lot of other qualified people would be happy to have that job maybe. I mean,
I would disagree with that, ma'am. It's my own personal opinion, because I'm very aware of the surrounding jurisdictions, what they pay building departments.
I'm speaking generally. I don't know one specific job description that we're speaking to. Again, this is why at the beginning of this discussion, my impression of something like this is that we really need to look at it in conjunction with a pay survey, and let's talk about the individual, you know, maybe this works great in your department, maybe it works great in all departments, maybe it doesn't, but I think it really is going to be informed by where are our pay levels at proportionate to, you know, what certifications we need. And I'm all for, absolutely, without a doubt, encourage everybody to increase their education, encourage the quality of our employment, but you know, we have serious budgeting concerns, and matter of fact, I think the largest bit of our budget is staff, you know, and we're here for the people just as much as we need to be here for staff. So I just want to look at it as a holistic thing, rather than if we throw this on and then when we're looking at the pay survey, we forget, well, we've already done this, and how is that going to tweak the numbers? You know, I think it should be seen together. That's me. I don't know about the rest of everybody else.
I agree. I think we need to do something, because I think, back to Commissioner George, we need to take care of our people, because if not, they're going to move on. I mean, I think that's the reality of it, but I think to what degree do we do that? And I think maybe putting them together so we can see, okay, and maybe it changes the job description. Now that you have this degree, it now changes the job description, so you go from a level 1 employee to a level 2 employee, or vice versa.
I just want to stop for 1 minute for the,
I'll make a motion to extend the meeting until 10 o'clock.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? If we extend the meeting.
So that's, I mean, I think that we have to Commissioner George's sentiment, is that we have to look out for our employees. I mean, I think that's as important as anything. We also have to look out for where the budget's going. And I think that taking care of people, it's just working together. And I think this is a great opportunity to look at, and I think to combine it with where we are salary-wise. I know that we are super low, and to combine those two together, I think would work at the end.
Okay.
I noticed there's just one thing to point out. There was a placeholder for Public Works Department.
yeah, at this point, I believe Bill had told me that he did not see anything yet that he would want to put on, so.
Well, that's, I do have some that I will be wanting to add at some point. Some will be for certain certifications to do mechanics type work that we end up contracting a lot out to various mechanics. If we can learn how to do some of those things in-house, there's some potential there for long-term savings. And if we encourage people to get that certification, then we can bring more of the maintenance of the vehicles in-house. There's other things. There's one that I want to put in for the future when I ask for an engineer position. If I ask for an engineer intern versus an engineer and they get their engineering degree, we could do that via promotion as well. It doesn't have to be through a certification, but there's a few. There's probably not as many as some of the other departments, but I would like to put a few in place.
I am 100% on board with providing financial incentive to our staff to increase their education, continually increase their education levels. So, but I'd like to see this come back with the rest of the salary surveys and that information, if that's going to be in March, and then maybe in between now and then, you can go back and maybe add some of the things that Brian has added to his to limit some of the exposure over the course of a year, where there's some caps, or maybe refine it a little bit.
Okay. Incentive, I think of incentive as a one-time incentive bonus. All the jobs can probably be parsed into levels, and achieving a certain level of education for an ongoing salary increase, level 1, 2, 3, you could work that in there. It is more work, but it is remember, the jobs we create, the job description we create is for a certain background, and each level requires more. So for anything that is an ongoing salary increase should probably be accomplished through needs of the city, job description, and grade, and progression.
Well, we do that. We
Right,
do have
right.
our job descriptions that show the certifications that are needed.
Right,
And
right.
some people have them, some people don't. So we do work upon that to try to get them to increase their education. You know, it's up to them to be willing to
Right.
do it or not, and whether we give them a raise or not.
But
So-
if the commission tells the staff and the city manager that here's your budget this year for personnel, and because of whatever revenues are, whatever, and we are limited to a 3% increase overall,
Yeah,
we still have budget constraints.
right. I
So,
understand that.
okay, I think we can accomplish this, but I think there was a misunderstanding on what we were looking at.
Okay. All right, we'll bring it back in March.
Excuse me, when we do, that salary survey, it's also going to be benefits, correct? Or is it just salary survey?
It's just salary. I didn't do the benefits because we're actually, I believe, equal to the surrounding areas. But we can go into that more in March, because I'm not prepared today to talk about benefits.
Right, well, okay, to the extent any data can be included regarding benefits, it would be helpful. I mean, when we get there. I remember, I thought last year or the year before, there had been a survey of benefits. I don't know if we could pull any of that data, but, well, I know you're busy. I'm not trying to put more on your workload, but, okay. And then I guess if you could maybe circulate some, I think you did circulate some of it to me in the past, but I could try to do some legwork, find out the benefits too, those cities that have been selected to look at comparisons, so. Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, the last one I have is a few minor changes for certain sections to upgrade. So basically, unless you have any questions, they're mostly just updating the rest of the leave things. I did take out the leave requests and the payroll checks, because everybody is doing that, basically. What was I trying to say here? We use the leave request forms, and all of those get done by the city. So I just didn't feel like they were necessary, but if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Well, we're automating a lot of this now, right? With automating leave requests and things, it's all
Yes.
automated.
Yes.
So,
That should be automated, as well as the payrolls. We all do electronic checks and so forth, so it's not like there's a need to do a bunch of these kind of things.
The only question, Beverly, I had is under the following type of leaves are officially established. I saw paternity leave, I did not see maternity leave there.
No, because paternity leave is the same as maternity leave. So, yeah. So it's the same, the difference is you can't discriminate against the husband for not having a child because it is his child too. So we use it as paternity leave.
Okay. Anyone have any questions about this one? If not, I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 21-08.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, this resolution passes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we are up to staff, what are we up to?
No, ma'am,
Driveways.
Yes, ma'am, number 12. As you were all informed during the budget meetings last year, now that I've solidified the building department, I've turned my careful eye to the planning and zoning budget. The planning and zoning budget has dramatically increased in its revenue this year, just reallocation of fees and where it's supposed to be, but to continue trying to get more money to offset the cost of the planning and zoning department from general funds, I spoke with Public Works Director, and we do recommend the use of right-of-way permits. Keep in mind that if you have a permit to build a structure, a residential house, you will not be assessed another fee for that existing house. There's no reason to double dip, as they pay $400 for that zoning review currently. So as you noticed on your first page, the memo from Mr. Tredick, he talks about the construction without permits and all that, and the assessed fees. I have modified that on the fee schedule because as I built the computer program for the fees, I have working without a permit, it automatically defaults to double the assessed value, so you just put in what it costs, and it does it. That's important to keep in mind in the event that the commission sees fit to increase that price later or lower that price. So if you go to page 6, what you have is in red. The reason I'm presenting this, even though I don't control right-of-ways, is because it's my fee schedule, and I'll be the one creating the software to handle the permitting of this. So once we discuss this, I have a little flyby I want to present.
So if someone takes out their paved driveway and puts in pavers, would they have to get a permit?
Yes, ma'am, on an existing. And keep in mind, the land development code under the setback section prohibits, you could consider a driveway a deck by the definition. It's a horizontal paved or unpaved surface. Well, less than 12 inches off the ground is exempt from permitting. So there was no mechanism for us to enforce anything, even in the rights-of-way. So this is part of the thing, if you recall, I call it a lot of the infancy stages. This is how it begins with this. We now have a fee. The Public Works Director has a very good application. If this moves through, we will release that application, then I will trick the computer software to think rights-of-way is a building permit. And then Public Works will be able to issue the permits. My department will stay out of this, except for obviously technical assistance with the computer software.
How will we educate, are we worried about that?
Yes, ma'am, I have thought about that because I am concerned that people have been operating the same way for 40, 50 years. My recommendation is we do a media release with the events and the PIO coordinator. Okay. We post it on our webpage, on the general page. We post it in all public buildings along with the application. The intent is not to be draconian or to punish people. Maybe, and that's something I want to bring up, whatever time period the commission feels comfortable, I would recommend at least 3 months. We have been educating people as we see them anyways, as we're alerted. We usually send code enforcement out to say, hey, you can't do widening an 18-foot wide driveway because in 2020 or 19, we approved 18-foot wide maximum. So we've stopped a couple of them. What they do on their property is their business because once again, decks aren't permitted under 12 inches, but we can at least protect the right-of-ways. And also, like I said, Public Works will be doing this, so they'll be able to assess if there's a drainage concern or something of that magnitude.
What about where somebody has the driveway with the kind of parking space as a part of their whole driveway thing? Is that considered part of the 18 feet? Because that would be wider than...
Well, yes, ma'am, we're only speaking in the city's rights-of-way. So when you see the driveway go in, then it opens up into their yard, that's their concrete or pavers or shell. But the city's rights-of-way is, I can tell everybody, it's mine, it's y'all's.
Right.
It's the people's. So the intent several years ago was to regulate the width because you had no mechanism. Somebody was submitting a 30-foot wide driveway, and there was nothing we could do to stop them, other than just saying, I don't like it.
Well, I think what Commissioner's also talking about is someone creates a parking pad almost entirely within the right-of-way.
Okay. This will now bring the attention to the Public Works Director, and we will go. And we've already actually approved one. We did, Public Works did, because it's their property, it's not mine. I deal in private property. But yes, this would technically bring it all through the process. If the Public Works Director saw no concerns, and it would really be up to his department.
Okay.
But yes, ma'am, they plague the city, and that's another concern, that people have been taking city property and using it on their own.
Right. Well, we decided to just not deal with that.
Right, and keep in mind, and this is not retroactive, this is moving forwards.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So tell me about the parking pads again. I know the driveway, but where the language in this, it's a resolution?
This is a resolution to amend the city's fee schedule.
Okay.
So without this, we can't implement right-of-way permitting.
So this would trigger a $100 application fee for the permit, Mayor, on either the driveway or an abutting parking pad, as you call it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the language on a parking pad, but
Well, it's intended for all rights-of-way, but under residential number 2, construction or modification of residential driveways within a city right-of-way not associated with an active building and/or zoning permit, $100. And then working with no permit, it's $100 in double permit fee. That comes straight out of the existing fee schedule.
I think we're going to have to be very careful of the language. You know, the driveway's clear, but to reach further,
Well, I would honestly say, if somebody came to me and wanted to build a parking pad, I'd tell you no. It's city property.
Right.
And you've already burned up your 18-foot in your driveway.
Might be one of those things that we just don't mention.
It's inherently already,
okay.
you've heard me refer to it as called squatting.
Right.
I consider you're squatting on my property
Okay.
because the city owns it and people are altering it without your permission.
If I could just say something, on the one that Brian mentioned that we approved recently, it was made clear that any parking, it was a parallel parking space, that it would be public, and that they could park there, but they couldn't prohibit other members of the public from parking there because it's a public right-of-way. So that was, and they agreed to that particular term in the permit, and so it was allowed. Just like we have parallel parking in other streets along the city. It was also in an area that's transient rental, so it was commercial. So from that standpoint, we didn't have any mechanism to assess a fee for the review time of the shop drawings and all the other site inspections that we did, but now we would be able to collect, in this case, that would be a $250 fee because it's commercial. And so that would pay for our time to go out and inspect multiple times to make sure it's put in right into the city standards because it's within the right-of-way.
And keep in mind, just so you're aware, last year I contacted finance about maybe a rights-of-way account and I think there was one for roads in the event we ever got involved in private development. This money doesn't go to the Building and Zoning Department, doesn't go to Public Works. It goes to the general fund under the rights-of-way. It's this new bank account. All that money will move into there. And I imagine Patty will have disposal at it when it comes for budgeting time. However, all that works out. I'm not expecting a major windfall in here, but it does answer the questions, what are we doing?
Well, I'm in favor of doing something because when you disturb the right-of-way around the street, you could be disturbing a swale or a water flow or something, and all of a sudden, somebody's got a problem.
Yes, ma'am.
So, yeah, as long as we catch these things, because these swales tend to fill in over time, and then all of a sudden somebody's putting, especially for the short-term rentals, they're adding a parking pad. And then all of a sudden, somebody up street is getting the water.
What this does, this gets the Public Works Director involved, but it also opens the door for code enforcement. So now I have a mechanism. We have a resolution that approved the fee schedule. You didn't apply for a permit. There you go. And as we continue to evolve what we would call a development review manual, if the city doesn't have one, it's inferred in little bits and pieces down the road. As time permits, we'll start creation of one. And that's when you'll see it'll all tie together. But this is the first step. We need the mechanism to charge. We have the application. We'll release it. We'll do a public information through all the medias that we have, and then we're going to educate. And then if people are in violation, we'll go by and say, hey, you need to get a permit. Contact Public Works, what we normally do.
Okay, so the moratorium on fining somebody, we need to decide on that.
I would recommend at least 3 months, given the nature, but it's definitely your decision.
I'm thinking a little longer.
Okay.
6 months?
A year. I'm starting to hear a lot of rumblings about fees and fines and fees and fines, and I grant we need to implement this kind of thing. The new development in the city is somewhat limited, right? So I agree with the shift to this type of thing, but we've been doing a lot of it over the last couple of years, and I'm starting to hear some pushback. So I'm not saying don't do this, but I do think we've got people who have been doing business in the city for a long time, and all of a sudden, hey, they don't build a house every 3 months or modify a driveway every 3 months. It's probably pretty rarely. So I would say a year moratorium on the penalty side of it, and maybe even a first-time waiver for folks that's, hey, I didn't know, or somebody that, if I were going to go down and ask for a modification of my driveway, I wouldn't know to go get a permit for it, right? So,
and that's why I strongly recommend giving a waive on the code enforcement side of it, but the permitting side should start.
The permitting side, yeah, so hey, if there's a $100 permit, that's great, but don't hit me with a fine on top of it.
Keep in mind, this isn't an intent to solely generate revenue. This is to get the Public Works Department involved in the alteration of the existing city's rights.
I think that's really important because of, our vulnerability study, sea level rise, more water in the city, more rain events, all of that. We need to protect the right-of-ways and keep the water flowing in the right direction.
And keep in mind, it's the city's property also.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Can we create the need for a new permit just by resolution?
well, we have to have the fee schedule so we can reference it all, but still, that's going to be I won't be involved in the permitting process other than the computer.
Wouldn't we need an ordinance to create the need for a new permit?
Well, working the right-of-way, I can't quote the ordinance like Brian can, but there still is a requirement to get a permit for working the right-of-way.
Right,
We don't have any
gotcha.
fees associated with it that
Okay.
I'm aware of.
Okay.
And that being said, I'm planning to come back with a redrafted, updated right-of-way permitting system so that we can start paying for some of the reviews through, and it's not an intent to punish or penalize, it's an intent to fund the necessary reviews to ensure that the right-of-way is protected. And, there's certain things we can't charge fees for, and like telecommunications, and certain things that we wouldn't charge fees to, like St. Johns County utilities, but there's driveways, there's other things that go in the right-of-way that are appropriate for fees, so.
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt, but we only have maybe 8 minutes left. So we do have to vote on a new meeting date and so forth, so I don't want to just remind you.
Okay, so obviously we need to carry over this meeting to finish up. And normally we would do it on Tuesday night. But Commissioner Torres, you have a conflict for tomorrow night?
I do for tomorrow night, along with Wednesday night and Thursday. Unfortunately, I have 3 special district meetings scheduled for this week.
What about next Monday night?
Next Monday night, I'm free. I'm also, I can also work in Tuesday and Wednesday at morning meeting. I don't have meetings until 6 PM in those districts.
I can't do this week daytime. Monday, the 8th, I could do.
Clear for me also.
I can do Monday.
Okay, so we will continue this meeting to Monday, February 8th. You want to start at 5 or 6?
Either one.
I'm flexible. 5 is better for me, but
Okay,
whichever.
so
I think 5 maybe, because we have to do the strategic plan and,
right, so
Can we do 5:30?
yeah.
Just so I can kind of wrap up and grab a sandwich and get here?
So we will continue this meeting until Monday, February 8th at 5:30.
Do you need a motion for that, Lex?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So I'll make the motion. Need a
I'll
second?
second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? So we will continue this meeting. Okay, I think we've got time to finish just this topic, the permitting fees.
So basically, that's the summary of it, is just to create a mechanism so when Public Works engineers are involved, the city's being compensated for their time.
Okay,
So as I hear, we want to issue a one-year moratorium on any kind of penalty or code enforcement fines, with
Right.
permitting rolling it out as soon as the software can handle it.
so is there a motion to approve resolution number 21-09?
I'll make a motion to approve 21-09 with the changes of a year, and also maybe waive the first penalty.
So waive a year, then
And
waive the
and
first
waive the
penalty
first
a year
penalty.
after?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't understand it. Are you saying waiving the fee for the full year?
Waive the fee for the full year, and then you get, as soon as you get, say, your first ticket or first fine, that we waive the penalty.
But at that time, we encourage them, when I say encourage, I mean require them to come in and get the appropriate
Correct.
permit. So they get a year, and then they get the first time they
Correct.
encroach.
That's permanent, so 10 years down the road, somebody finally changes their driveway and they don't, and I think we should put a cap on the time for the waiver of the penalty as well.
Honestly, what happens when code enforcement goes out real fast, we don't swing the axe right out of the gates. We use it as an educational tool.
That's fine.
If they come into compliance voluntarily,
At your discretion.
it's no harm, no foul. Like I said, we use it as a teaching tool for the citizens.
All right, so,
So a motion then to waive the penalty for 1 year,
okay, but the
the fee.
requirement for so you're waiving the permit for a year and waiving a penalty for a year,
I don't,
Waiving the fee,
fee for a year.
the penalty.
the penalty fee, not the fee of the permit.
Not, yeah, the permit's there, just the penalty fee.
They're waiving code enforcement action for 1 year.
Okay, state your motion again.
That's all right. Make a motion for, was it 2009?
2109.
And to waive the penalty fee for 1 year.
And then when would the fee become effective?
As soon as we roll out the software. Basically, what would happen if somebody was rolling out a new driveway in 2 weeks, they ripped something out, we would say, hey, you need to have a permit, come on down to City Hall, we'll get you an application, we'll do it, we'll get it over to Public
The
Works.
effective date of this resolution would have to be stated.
As maybe 3 months from now.
That's what we did with the setbacks, we did a 3-month moratorium in 2018.
So say April, May?
My recommendation is we go till May 1st.
That's fine.
So
Effective date.
effective, the fee becomes, the permit requirement and the fee become effective May 1st, but no penalties until,
May of 2022.
correct. Okay, perfect, perfect.
Good, Lex? You got all that?
Okay.
Lots of dates.
So I'll second that motion to approve resolution number 21-09 with those changes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, resolution 2109 is approved.
I'll spend it.
Right. So we will adjourn and pick up staff comments, strategic plan, scheduling workshops at the February 8th.
Is that a motion? I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned.